Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 9th regular meeting of council for 2022. I am asking for an approval of the agenda, please. It's been approved by Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, please vote now. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone. Nice to see you here. I'd like to congratulate all of our Kennebecasis Valley High School graduates, our university graduates, community college, and all those who are completing any form of secondary education. It's certainly a wonderful time and nice that our students were able to get back to school in a different way, but still a little better than what it was the previous year or two. Also, just a reminder to sign up for the Participaction Community Better Challenge. We still have a couple of weeks left in that. I believe we're number 6 right now in New Brunswick. The community who has the most active minutes recorded will win $100,000. So if you go to participaction.com and sign up, your movements and actions on the pickleball court and so forth will all be recorded, or your walks through the trails. So you could help us out with that. Asking that children have a great last week of school. Kids that are in kindergarten through grade 8 are in their final week of school. I would also like to ask that people are aware that there will be more kids walking the streets and out and about, so let's pay a little more attention to the speed limits within our communities. Certainly all residential speed limits are at 40, and we hope that everybody will respect that. Today is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and that was first celebrated in Canada in 1996, and it falls on the summer solstice, and it is meant to recognize and honor our First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and Métis cultures, and we wish them a happy Indigenous Day. We also have Jus de l'Acadie coming beginning on July 1st. This is also the LGBTQ1A month, Pride Month. What else do we have? Lots of celebrations going on. Of course, July 1st is Canada's 155th birthday, so lots to celebrate here right outside our door at the Arts and Culture Park, so please feel free to join us. And also, I would like to shout out to Austin He of Quispamsis. He was in the 35th Annual Spelling Bee of Canada Championship. He's a grade 5 student, and he did very well in the spelling bee. So lots of things to celebrate in our community, lots of people to celebrate, and I think we need to keep that in mind when we go through rough times, that there's still lots to celebrate and to be joyful for within Quispamsis. So now I'd like to ask for the treaty acknowledgement. We have seats up front, ladies and gentlemen. Treaty acknowledgement, if you wouldn't mind, Councillor Thompson.
Worship. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Quispamsis exists on the traditional territory of the Wistwe, Maliseet, and Micmac people, whose ancestors, along the Passamaquoddy tribe, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. We'd like to take a moment to pay respect to the elders, past and present, and the descendants of this traditional territory. We would also like to take this moment to reflect on our solidarity and support for the people of Ukraine, acknowledging that Canada has the third largest Ukrainian population in the world behind Ukraine itself and Russia. Blue and yellow lights have been placed in the front section of the Quispamsis Town Hall to mark our support for those impacted by the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And may we remind ourselves of the important work we have before us tonight, and may we make good decisions without prejudice or bias, and always in the best interest of our community, which we are here to serve.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Item number 4, disclosure of interest, and Deputy Mayor Scryer, you have item number 10. Mr. Loge, you have item number, I don't have that written down, but I think it's one of the developments, and we'll come to that at that point and ask that you leave. 6. Item number 6, thank you. Item number 5 is presentations. We have a request for additional stop signs on Cedar Ridge Boulevard to help slow down traffic. We have a presenter, Martina Carvel, and we also have a staff report from the Director of Engineering and Works that was in your package, in your council package. Is Ms. Carvel here? Would you like to come up to the podium, please? Just give your name for the clerk, please.
My partner and I recently moved to Deer Path Court off of Cedar Ridge here in Quispam. We like to be active members of the community. We walk our dog a lot, and we know that there's a lot of other people in the community doing the same thing, and a lot of young families moving into that neighborhood. But we find that the Cedar Ridge Boulevard, people drive over the speed limit, and there's also a lot of trees in the middle of the boulevard that kind of impact people's visibility, so it can be dangerous with the speeding traffic. So what I'm proposing is that the town add some extra stop signs to help slow people down and force them to stop and look around their surroundings. Similarly to what the town of Rossay did on Donlin Drive in that same neighborhood, they added a few extra stop signs around the playground and different intersections that really slow people down. It made a big difference when they put those in. So specifically on Cedar Ridge, the intersections of Pete Drive and Lyman Drive, I think would make a big difference in that neighborhood, having stop signs there.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carvel. We have a second. We have a recommendation. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. Carvel, for your presentation. we've had this discussion, actually I've been here for 10 years on council. So the last time this came up about Cedar Ridge was in 2016, and I believe there was one time prior to that. In 2016, we had, I think, equal amount for and against it. So it's better if we have like a poll to show, because we've also got a letter, I don't know if you've seen it, maybe not, it was an email that a gentleman also that is at that stop doesn't want them there as well. So I guess the more information we have, or the more people for or against, it helps. But also what I'm really looking for, because we did install one, I'm going to guess 2014, I'm looking towards the director of engineering. We did put one near closer to where the police station is, because back then we actually did speed assessments. So we could actually see where people were speeding up and where they were slowing down. So we actually ended up putting one, ironically, the speeds was the fastest when you got closer to the police station before. So I guess my question through you, Your Worship, to the Director of Engineering, when's the last time that we have done a review of the speed on that drive? I know we do that we do that on different streets at different times, so I don't know when the last time we've done that, because that would be indicative. I know we've done it on Queensberry and things like that, if Cedar Ridge has done that, or if that could be done in the future to see if there has been changes. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go over to Mr. Loge.
Yes, Your Worship. The last counts were done at the time of the request that you mentioned in 2016. So we don't have any revised numbers. So, you know, as you're aware, staff generally recommends that we follow our traffic calming policies when it comes to the use of stop signs. Stop signs are not traffic control devices. They're intended to be there for right-of-way, establishing right-of-way. But what we do is, as you mentioned, Councillor Miller, is that we do verify that with counts, not just at the main street, but also the side streets, because the use of a stop sign is really based on all the intersections, the legs of the intersections, the levels of traffic that are there. That would be one of the recommendations that we would include is before any decisions are made, we would actually want to revise the counts, you know, on not just Cedar Ridge, but the side streets leading into the identified intersections to see what has changed over the last few years. We can, from our last measurements, there were between the 2014 and 2016, there were no significant changes in the speeds. And I would really want to see what's there now before we make any recommendations to councils one way or another.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to Ms. Carvel for bringing this to our attention. And again, thank you to Mr. Loge for the staff report. And I do appreciate that, you know, again, as a town, we don't want to use stop signs as you know, a means to control speed. But I guess looking at the issue is, I want to thank Ms. Carvel for at least bringing the issue and also proposing a solution, but maybe looking at it in terms of, you know, in 2012, it was an issue. In 2016, it was potentially brought up as an issue. So this has been going on for about a decade at least, in terms of residents concerned about speeding. So again, maybe it's not stop signs that we're looking at for the solution, but I would like to, as proposed, explore what the speeds are, and then look at, I know one of the suggestions was to let the police, the Quispamsis Regional Police Force know, and I think that that's important, but they can't do everything. And I think, you know, we are doing a good job trying to control speeds on other streets. And personally, I'd like to see us, you know, take this concern seriously. I used to live in that neighborhood, and I always hated that street because, you know, even though it's very beautiful, because of the median, it creates a very dangerous, you know, area when you're talking about kids and cars, because it is very hard because it's quite windy. And when, you know, when kids are walking, it is concerning. So again, I think the issue here is speed and not maybe the solution. You know, maybe stop signs aren't the solution if that's not what we want to use. But I think that we need to look at, you know, step back and look at the bigger picture that, you know, it has been brought up in the past where speeding on that road, actually speeding is one of the most common things I hear from residents. So I guess, you know, I would really like to see us, you know, take those steps as proposed in the staff report where we do some type of traffic analysis and then come back to council with kind of a plan based on our findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and also thank you to Ms. Carvel for coming forward and bringing this forward to discuss. And I take note of how you'd mentioned that, you know, this has come up a couple of times before over the last decade, and Councillor Luck mentioned that as well. And of course, Cedar Ridge is one of the original subdivisions, I think, in Quispamsis. You know, it's goes all the way back to the 60s or something. And I feel like I should know the answer to this, but I don't. So I'll ask Your Worship, or perhaps over to the Director of Works and Engineering. But the median that's so attractive along much of that road is owned and managed how? It's kind of a two-part question. They're not covenants with the property owners, are they? To maintain the, I'm thinking about overgrowth because it's become such a mature area. And nobody wants to see trees cut down, of course, including me. But I just wonder, is there any strategy to sort of, you know, paring it and thinning it a little as time goes by? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Mr. Loge, please.
The median is within the municipal right-of-way. There is a neighborhood agreement that was established with the initial subdivision developer where the residents themselves would mow and trim the trees, but there was no formal process for that. The town has gone in the last few years and removed dead or damaged trees, but as soon as we go beyond what a neighbor thinks is reasonable, the calls will come to the office faster than, you know what, it's, even though it's not theirs, they don't enjoy looking across the street at the other windows, so it's protected quite fiercely when they see staff in there cutting trees. But they do take turns mowing the grass in there. And to the point about the speed and the trees, when it comes to traffic calming, you would like to think that people are driving with a complete awareness of their surroundings. And I know I personally drive through there with the assumption that somebody's going to be driving or coming out through the trees, so I drive the speed limit or lower. It's familiarity with the people that live there that say, oh, I've never seen anything, I'll drive, or they're blind or they're on their phone. And to Councillor Luck's point, there's more at issue here than what a stop sign could do, and that's why it's staff's recommendation that we look at this a little bit more thoroughly to make sure that we can address the root cause, because even though it's come before council a few times, when we look at our reporting, it ends up being a perception issue as much as anything else. And you know, people are going to be perceiving their safety when they see a vehicle going by that in their opinion is going too fast. And in some situations it may be, in some situations it just catches somebody by surprise. So I think the establishment of a base analysis is critical to making sure that we address these issues properly, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Deputy Mayor Scryer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Carvel, for bringing this to our attention. As Councillor Luck had said, you know, if I could say, have a nickel for every time I say I wish people would just slow down for the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we spend on traffic calming in our town. If people would just slow down and take notice of their surroundings, we'd have a lot of money that we could spend on other services. With that being said, I'd be prepared to put a motion forward to recommend that at this point, not to put the signs in, but to have instead request and refer the speeding concerns of the residents to the Canada Cases police force who enforce this, and that the town engineering staff perform traffic monitoring counts to update the vehicle volumes and the speed data and forward the information on to the police, and once completed, and back to council.
It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Olson on the question.
just on the question.
Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Worship. I know that this has come up with concerns for the traffic flow on Cedar Ridge from trees overgrowing, restricting view between the turning points on that road. It's ironic that we have a comparative road almost parallel to it in the Donlan Drive, where Rossi has installed, I think, 3 or 4 sets of stop signs. And personally, I travel both of those roads, and I don't see cars driving through them, through the stop signs. People are respectful of that. And as I talk to people about traffic and that, I try to get them to relate to showing some respect for the neighborhood that they're passing through or visiting through. And I think that that's a big aspect of all, that we have to educate our residents in the speeding part. We also, I think, authorized the police department to expand with 4 new constables to be dedicated to traffic control. So maybe we'll have some more police presence on Cedar Ridge Boulevard. So just some food for thoughts there. But yeah, I like the setup in Donlan Drive because I like the stop signs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Thank you, Ms. Carvel. We have a motion on the table. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Olson on the question. Seeing there are none, please vote now. Item number 6, public hearings. 6A, rezoning application 160 Pettingill Road, PID number 251462, George Queen property. So the request is for residential R1 to multiple residential R2, proposed mixed-use residential development, single and 2-family residential homes, semi-detached dwellings, and 4 low-rise multiple dwelling buildings, each containing 12 low-rise 2-story apartment units for a total of 69 to 72 units. I would like to say that Mayor and Council acknowledge that it has been requested to and plans to consider amending zoning bylaw number 38. Number 2, that this day has been set and the place for this public hearing. Number 3, that anyone wishing to speak for or against the proposed amendment will be heard and considered by council. Each person wishing to speak will approach the podium, identify themselves by name, and have a 5-minute timeline to address council. So the steps would be that the presentation would come first by the proponent. I would then call for those speaking or wishing to speak for or against the proposal, and that you would be given the opportunity to be heard. I will then ask 3 times if anyone further wishes to speak for or against the proposed amendment. The proponent will make a final summation after those speaking for and against are heard. PAC's written views are in our package. Council members may ask questions, and a motion may be presented and voted upon. We have all council members present this evening, so the last note of somebody not being present would not be able to carry through for the final reading. So I am asking now for the proponent to come forward and make your presentation, please. Good evening, welcome. Would you please give your name for the clerk?
Good evening, Andrew Dunn.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you all for allowing me to be here this evening. As we've discussed a few times, and I'm sure everyone in the room has seen the information, I'll try to be very brief because I'm sure other people would like to speak and ask questions. So we're trying to fill a need of high-density housing in the town by copying a mixed-use residential plan that's worked quite well throughout the province. One of our biggest concerns, I'm sure everybody's, is that we have adequate water supply. And I believe part of the conditions set by the town would be to ensure that our water and everyone else's is safe and that no one's wells would be affected. So as you mentioned, we're looking to increase the density up to 72 units, which would be a mixture of single-family homes, apartments, low-rise apartments, and duplexes.
Is that your
That is it.
presentation? Okay, just stay there for a second. Okay, you may take your seat, and I'm going to call anyone who wishes to speak for or against your project.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll call you back up later. So I'm going to ask 3 times, so please come to the podium when you are asked. If you hear something said that was a concern of yours or not a concern of yours, in other words, if you're for something and somebody else has already said that, or if you're against something and somebody has already said that, there isn't a need for you to come up unless you really feel obligated to express your own personal concern. So at this time, I'm going to ask for anyone who has objections or approval for this development. Is there anyone here who would like to speak for or against this development? I'm only going to ask 3 times, so as soon as you hear me ask that question, please come directly to the podium. Please give your name for the clerk. Once I've asked the 3rd time, it's going to be too late to come to the podium. So if you'd like to line up, if you do have, an objection, or if you are in favor of it, please feel free to make the cue now. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. My name's Neil London. I live at 56 Heritage Way, which would be the triangle piece of property directly below where Mr. Dunn wishes to build the mixed-use residential apartments and townhomes. I guess a couple of things. When I seen the plan, I was quite concerned about the size of the pond that's going to now be directly beside my home. So a couple of things that I have, and maybe it's in the package, I didn't get a chance to look at it tonight, but what is the size of that holding pond that's going to be right next to 50, literally, if you bring the map up, it's right next to my home. So I'm just curious, is that going to be always full of water? Is it going to be elevated above my home? And I guess when I purchased that property and had my home built, I looked at what the plan was, which was approved by town council, I believe, in 2015, and there was no mention of mixed-use apartments. There was no mention of a huge stormwater runoff pond right next door to my home. So I just kind of curious. I know there's lots of land around the town. There's land for sale down by the Great Canadian Dollar Store that is, I believe, zoned for this. So I understand what Mr. Dunn is saying about wanting to have, increase the need, or there is a need to increase the availability. I'm just wondering why we would look at changing property that's already zoned to that people in the last 5 years have bought homes there and built homes there based upon that zoning, instead of filling out some of the property that's already been approved by council. And then I know Mr. Dunn mentioned about the water. I think if you asked everybody on Heritage Way, they would tell you there's already an issue with the water down there. I know that Mr. McIntyre presented earlier this year about another development off Pettingill. That's also a concern about the water, and I know he's doing a study on that. Then also, my biggest concern, obviously, is the water and the fact that there's going to be a huge holding pond next to my home. So as a resident within, I don't know how many meters, because it doesn't actually say, will I be able to have an independent engineer look at the study to make sure that my home is safe if there is going to be a pond and it's going to be elevated? Because I don't really want to have, I don't really want to have a pond let go and flood my home. And then finally, I see tonight that has been some discussions with CN. Just curious what the process is in terms of ensuring that CN is involved, because that runoff pond, if it were to ever let go, would affect their main line. The only other question I had is, on the application, it says that the plans mention some form of buffers between the apartments and the current adjoining residences. So what do those buffers look like? You know, are they going to be, is there going to be trees? Will they be adding in berms? And then finally, back to the pond, sorry, that just really concerns me. I haven't walked that land, but I've walked the trail. I know that the land runs off kind of into a valley towards the new school that's right there. Has there been any thought of maybe changing the layout so that rather than have a pond within, you know, say 100 meters of residences, that pond is pushed over on the other side? So if it were to ever let go, it doesn't run directly onto the trail, onto CN, onto my property, but goes down in the valley where there are no residences. Those are kind of my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions and concerns. We will move forward and then we'll answer any questions unless, should we go forward first? Yeah. We'll move forward first and hear from anyone speaking for or against, and then we'll address, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Would you please give your name for the clerk? Welcome.
It's Diane Gregory. Thank you for holding this meeting tonight. I live next door to Neil, so I'm on the other side, but I recently moved here 2 months ago from Ontario. I'm originally from New Brunswick, from St. Stephen, and I chose to move here because I saw this as a lovely community, and I thought the whole area around Ritchie Lake is beautiful. I am concerned about a stormwater management pond being built above the walkway where I see children every day walking along there. I see people exercising, walking, and I just think it would be a shame if that pond broke and somebody could drown even, I don't know. But I'm also concerned about it would be running into Ritchie Lake, which I'm not sure what could happen there, but I would think it would be a lot of runoff all at once and could affect people downstream and the lake. Being from Ontario, I've lived around stormwater management ponds, and I know that there is a mechanism to drain them as they get too full and managed. It's part of the process, but I've never seen one elevated above anything. They're always the lowest part of whatever that landscape is, so I am concerned about it being so high. Before I bought my house, my water was already quite cloudy, so I had to install a filter system. So that tells me that the water table is already maxed or pretty close to it, and to add increased density just above us, I know there's going to be a water assessment done, but I think that should be taken into consideration. I also am concerned about the increased density. When I bought, I was assured that there were going to be so many houses there, and you've increased the density by 67%. That's pretty high. Also, with the apartment buildings being at the back, I think that's what constitutes the need for the stormwater management pond. If you went back to the original plan, I don't believe that would be needed. I could be wrong, but that's my assessment, my humble assessment. I just think that it should be considered the amount of increased traffic that will be added to Pettingill as well. It's already very busy. and there are children there. There's a lot of crosswalks along there, kids going to school and so on. I think it should be considered that I don't know if there's a plan to increase the width of the road. Typically there is when you add increased density to an area. You widen the roads. This has been my experience. So I think that all these things should be taken into consideration. I don't think it's a good idea to increase the density of that property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, we will address these later with the developer. I'm going to ask 3 times if there is anyone else who would like to speak for or against the development. Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against the development? Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against the development? Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against the development? I will now ask Mr. Dunn to come up and do a final presentation.
Thank you. I'd like to try to answer or address at least the questions that the way I understood them. As Mr. London mentioned, I was curious of the size of the pond. I don't know, but the engineers would design a pond that fit the requirements of the land, and we work obviously with the town to make it fit the slope of the land and last over time. In my experience, these ponds typically don't have water in them. They're there to collect water in large storms so it doesn't run into people's backyards or contaminate lakes or anything else. And then it would disperse it through its natural course off of the property. The buffers would be a combination of berms and trees, shrubs. You really would not see these low-rise buildings from any of the neighbors below or beside or even on Pettingill. I believe those were the 2 questions. In terms of the pond breaking, I can't see how that would happen, but we would have engineers who would run various tests and ensure and certify that it would not. The water obviously is a concern from my research up on the hill where we're looking at building. There is quite a large supply of water. Instead of drilling 48 wells around the property, we'd be cutting that number in half. We would be having retention tanks, so we'd pump at a very low rate, and in my opinion it would be the same or better than having 48 individual wells. Traffic is obviously a concern, and part of our conditions from Council and PAC is that we complete a traffic study. So I'm assuming that would have to be approved by the town before we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. At this time, PAC's written views can be read. Councillor Donovan, please.
Thank you. Take notice that a decision of the Quispamsis Planning Advisory Committee was rendered in the matter of your request pursuant to the provisions of the Community Planning Act of New Brunswick. 1. Matter requested. Written views for council on the amendment of the zoning bylaw number 038 for the rezoning of PID 251462, 160 Pettingill Road from single or 2 family dwelling R1 to multiple residential R2. Mixed residential use development for the purpose of 4 multiple use buildings, semi-detached and single detached dwellings. 2. Date, place, and time. Date May 24th, 2022, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, Council Chambers. So the decision of the committee that the Planning Advisory Committee support council in their decision of rezoning of PID 251462 160 Pettingill Road from single or 2 family dwelling R1 to multiple residential R2 mixed residential use development for the purpose of 4 multiple unit buildings, semi-detached and single detached dwellings subject to the following items and conditions. 1, a full comprehensive traffic study for the Southwood Drive / Pettingill Road and future access to the proposed development. 2, the completion of an environmental impact assessment prior to final development and permitting approvals from the town. 3, an engineered design stormwater management plan and drainage system stamped by a registered professional engineer licensed to practice in the province of New Brunswick is to be completed and submitted for each phase of this development. 4, a geotechnical report regarding slope stabilization for the portion of the development along the QR Trail. 5, the proposed development shall be forwarded to CN Railway for review and comment as it relates to development near their rail infrastructure. 6, a site design showing the creation of the buffering zone as it relates to the neighboring residential R1 zones must be approved by the town prior to construction. 7, the development must include pedestrian trail connection to the QR Trail as well as a consideration to connection to École de Pionnier trail located at 250 Quispamsis Road. 8, street lighting installation at the entrance to the development shall be installed. 9, all building lights to be downward directed. 10, the developer is to enter into a development agreement with the town of Quispamsis. 11, the developer shall undertake to complete the work for each approved phase within a period of 2 years following approval, and the development schedule is to be included in the development agreement. 12, the lands shall be developed in accordance with the most recently dated building and development plans filed and approved by the town for each phase. And 13, if the development does not substantially proceed within 6 months of the date of approval for each phase, the developer shall restore the lands to an attractive natural state, and such restoration is to be completed within 60 days. The Planning Advisory Support is only for the Council's review of the amendment to the zoning bylaw number 038 for the rezoning of PID 251462 160 Pettingill Road from single or two-family dwelling R1 to multiple residential R2 mixed residential use development for the purpose of 4 multiple unit buildings, semi-detached and single detached dwellings, dated this 27th day of May, AD 2022, and it's signed by Violet Brown, the secretary for the Quispamsis PAC.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. At this time, we can have questions by council. So if you have any questions regarding this project, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I got quite a few questions, so maybe I'll just ask one or two and then I'll let others go.
Councillor Miller, are you directing those to the developer or to
Yes,
Mr.
developer.
Colburn? Would you please come back up, Mr. Dunn?
I guess my question, Your Worship, I have a few here, but maybe I'll just ask one or two, and then if it's not answered, could I have a second go?
If you could ask 2, and I'll
Perfect.
see, and we'll go around.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Dunn, and thank you to the residents for the concern. So, a few things still missing here, and I'll just ask a couple. I'll ask one of the ones that was asked. Currently, where the drainage pond is, it's a double question. So, is it going to be elevated, and is there a possibility that it can be moved to the other side of the development? That's my first question, please.
We haven't engaged the engineers at this point, other than to just give us a brief look of what it could be. So once they get involved, it would go in the best place for the pond and for the development. I don't believe it would be elevated as such, but more cut into the slope of the hill, and then we'd have to do some reinforcing on the lower side.
Okay. The other one was, we talked about buffer zones, and when I'm looking at the drawings, and maybe this is directed over to perhaps our planning officer, is what are the minimum buffer zones that we generally have for this type of development? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship, the zoning bylaw requires where you have multi-residential developments adjacent to lower density or R1 zones in this particular case, the minimum buffer width is 3 meters. But again, it can be under the discretion of the council whether they wish to have that increase, and that's something that would be established in the development agreement as part of this process.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. I've been sitting so long, I forgot what my question was. I, the question I have is, you know, with this pond, everybody keeps saying a pond, so I don't know. I'm trying to picture whether it's going to be like just a hole in the ground that is collecting water, you know, in the case of a storm, or if there is continually going to be water inside of it. So I don't know if you would know that or if somebody would know that, but it'd be great if I could have an answer.
From my understanding, and similar to the ones I've built in the past, it's going to be empty most of the time.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Squire, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for everyone who posed questions, and Mr. Dunn for coming back. My question is, again, to do with the map. It says the connection will be on Windsor Boulevard. So when I took a drive down, I couldn't identify Windsor Boulevard off of Heritage. There's no sign. So I'm not quite sure if it was on the right or on the left. Which one is Windsor Boulevard is my first question. If I could just know where exactly that is.
I believe it's the first one on your left coming off of Pettingill Road, but it's not there yet. So there wouldn't be a sign.
Mr. Coburn, you're agreeing with that?
Thank you, Worship. So Windsor Boulevard, as it sits currently on the subdivision plan, is identified as a future street. So it is when you're going down Heritage Way, it is the street on your left. It's been identified as Windsor Boulevard, so that would be part of the development through two developments. So Mr. Dunn would extend access from Pettingill Road down to the edge of his property, and then the future development of the remainder of Heritage would then connect that portion, and that would form Windsor Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn.
Thank you. So it's the first street on Heritage, the very first future street. Thank you. That clears that up for me. And the other question I did have was concerning the retention pond as well. So I guess that'll be left up. I just want to be guaranteed that that'll be left up to the engineers when they go on the land, and whether or not that can be moved. I can see quite clearly on the map what they're pertaining to, where it could be potentially moved to the back. And I don't know if the elevation of the properties or what would not allow that to happen, but and I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with retention ponds, because it makes a huge difference, especially with Ritchie Lake. So I'm just wondering through your worship to Mr. Coburn, if there would be the possibility to relocate that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So stormwater retention ponds are based on, the design is based on the change, I guess. So the way they're designed is you basically take the existing vacant land, you look at the vegetation, you look at the current runoff that comes as based on the current land. And then once you apply the factors of full build out, so you look at the percentage of asphalt, you look at the percentage of hard surfaces, roofs, and those types of things, and it basically gives you a difference. So then it looks at what is the flow coming off the land today, what are the downstream impacts, what are the receiving channels, and then it says what size pond do we need to create in order to hold a certain volume of water released over a certain period of time to make sure that there's no, it basically removes the peaks of flows and velocities of that water and tries to mimic what it would be based on the raw land. So the size at this stage has not been determined. What's been presented to council and the location is preliminary. There are still a number of steps that need to be taken to establish ultimately the location of the pond, the size of the pond, and making sure that it actually empties, so it doesn't retain water all the time. So it is a retention pond versus a detention pond. Some of the other elements that will need to be taken into consideration is, as has been indicated, is sort of on a slope or side hill. So it's going to have to be determined through the engineering process whether that's the best location. If it's determined it is the best location, we'll be looking at what are the downstream impacts. So one of the things that we always look at, especially in this situation, will be the what if. The what if it does let go. What's going to be impacted? So we have the trail, you have CN. CN will be involved in this process. So the actual engineering design of the pond, the proposed runoffs, all those types of things will have to be submitted to CN to ensure that doesn't impact their infrastructure. So they're involved in the process. One of the items of PAC that's been identified is that there's going to have to be a geotechnical report that will look at what is the slope stability of that side hill. So that will also take into consideration the pond. So what will be required to ensure that the pond stays where it is and it doesn't breach or let go. So all of those things have to be taken into consideration. At this stage, the engineers have not been engaged to that level as Mr. Dunn is moving through the process. So that's something that would have to be submitted to the town and would have to meet the requirements and ensure that, property safety, personal safety, and those types of things are paramount. I'll just make a quick comment on one of the comments that came back was the previous approvals. So the previous approvals that came through the town was for single detached construction. Those were tentative plans. So those plans were never ever formally approved through council, through the Ascended Council. So those subdivision plans for single detached dwellings were never approved. Through the tentative approval process, the reason there's no indication of where ponds would be located is because through a tentative process, you don't have to provide that information. Those are things that happen after tentative approval. The same approach is what's being taken in this particular case. Normally, once developers get tentative approvals, that's when they engage engineers and they do the full design. It's in that process that you identify if you're going to need a pond. So based on the information that was submitted for those tentative approvals, pond wasn't identified because it's, again, the engineering wasn't done to that level. It may have come about. So even with a single detached construction, there may have been a need for a pond. It's just that we didn't get to that stage. And tentative approvals are good for 1 year, and if the development doesn't happen within 1 year, then the approval becomes null and void, so you have to go back through the process again. So just wanted to highlight that in terms of if the reason why there was no pond identified. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Councillor Miller, I'm going to go to Councillor Luck first. She hasn't. Okay, your light came on first. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Colburn. I do have some other questions around the retention pond. I guess two of them would be, would more details be coming out prior to third reading if the first two readings were done tonight? And my second question, because it seems like in that area, runoff has become quite a topic. I'm wondering if it stayed as R1, I'm guessing you'd still need a retention pond. That's not because of it turning into R2. Would there still need to be a retention pond if, it never came to rezoning to begin with? Thank you.
Mr. Colburn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Your Worship. The first question about whether the design of the stormwater pond will be done prior to third and final reading. Normally through the process, that is a condition that's entered into the development agreement, and it usually occurs subsequent to the approval. So what the development agreement normally says is that the developer has to submit a comprehensive stormwater management plan with the design to meet the requirements of the town, and if it doesn't meet the requirements, then the actual rezoning is basically is not moving forward. We wouldn't issue building permits or anything of that nature. If council so desires that information to be submitted to council prior to third and final reading, they have the authority to put that as a condition before the development agreement and third and final reading is given. In terms of if a stormwater pond will be required for single family or single detached dwellings, again, that's something that we don't have the information for because we didn't receive engineering drawings based on the previous plans. It is possible that it would be required, but again, at this stage, I don't have, or the planning department doesn't have the information from previous applications to be able to provide you with that information.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Councillor Luck, or were you finished? Was that, okay? Councillor Donovan, have you asked a question yet? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is not so much for the developer, but for Mr. Coburn. I could have read it wrong, but I believe a while back I seen that the town of Rothsay recently approved or was in the process of approving an apartment building, and as part of their developers agreement, I believe they had some sort of inclusionary zoning policy, and it as part of the developers agreement, I believed it was like 10% or something like that of the apartment building must have been dedicated towards affordable housing or senior friendly apartments. So when you talk about a project this size, about 70, I believe it was 75 units or something like that, that would be 7 units. So, I don't think that's unreasonable. And I'm just wondering if we have anything in our developers agreements or if that's something that, the town could even try to do. I don't know. You would be more of an expert than I would. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Mr. Coburn.
Thank you, Worship. Through your Worship. So at this stage in our zoning bylaws, we don't have any policies or any requirements in terms of inclusionary housing. Through this process, if that's something that council wishes to see explored and included in the development agreement, then they would put that as a term and condition of the development agreement, and staff would work in collaboration with the developer to explore that option. And also we would be probably looking for some direction from our solicitor in terms of what the requirements are under provincial acts, and if there's anything that we would actually require in a bylaw to allow us to do that. But again, that's something that council at their discretion has the authority to establish as a reasonable term and condition based on the scope of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Coburn. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Worship. I think we need to have additional information on the retention pond. Thank you for your presentation. And before third and final can be given, there's appears to be a lot of concern associated with that. And I would imagine that the water would be in a runoff type of design, because I haven't seen too many retention ponds that are uphill from the runoff, unless they pump it or something like that, and I can't see that happening. But I think that would be important to council and the residents to secure the proper design of that retention pond and the orientation of it on the property. So I think that that's a critical part of the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Back to Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I still got some questions or concerns, and I guess maybe first of all, also not first, but also this will have to entail an environmental impact assessment, which is unlike some of the other ones that we've talked about in the past because of the communal well. What does that entail? Because I know the province is the one that, I believe, sorry, through your Worship to our planning officer, I believe the province is the one that oversees that part. So I guess, how does that work in this instance for those communal wells?
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Worship. So the environmental impact assessment is regulated and goes through the province, through the Department of Environment. So they're based on the scope of the project. So there are a number of triggers that trigger an environmental impact assessment. Those are listed on the provincial website in terms of what triggers in this particular case. There can be a number of items. In this particular case, we're looking at possibly a communal water system. So any project that extracts more than 30 cubic meters of water per day would trigger an environmental impact assessment. It also looks at if there's been any potential impacts on wetlands, so stormwater runoff, those types of things. So in this particular case, because it's proposed that it's a communal water system, then an environmental impact assessment will be required. That gets registered on the provincial website, and if you go on the provincial website, once it's registered, you can actually see the application. The province will actually send out to a number of stakeholders requesting, they'll provide the scope of the project, and they will request that you provide comment and any concerns that they should take into consideration as part of that process. There's currently a development that's just went through council that's being undertaken, and an environmental impact assessment. The registration, the application triggered a review. So it is something that's not unfamiliar to the municipality with these types of developments. So, and then the province reviews all the feedback, and they establish, again, terms and conditions if the approval takes place. And then they also have the option of obviously rejecting the scope of the project if they feel that some of the concerns cannot be mitigated. So it's through the province, so there is another level, obviously, of review and regulatory procedures that need to happen before this project would be ultimately approved at the municipal level. Because if the province does not approve the environmental impact, then we cannot move forward and do our part.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to lend my agreement to Councillor Olson's point. I think that, I take the point of our planning officer to heart, certainly, about how currently we are sort of absent the information to be certain if a retention pond is even required. I expect with the footprint of this, it probably would be, but we don't know that for sure. But that being said, I would just say that, whatever movement and advancement can happen tonight is a matter of the process. I would certainly be in favor of adding a caveat that third reading requires that we get some sort of formal report on the where a retention pond would go and can it be moved, and studying the elevation of that upper portion of the image here that I'm looking at. And so I just wanted to say I concur with Councillor Olson on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. This will be my last question, I promise. I guess I'm struggling a bit. We're talking about, some people talking about all the information for third reading, but I'm okay with going maybe one reading and coming back, but I need some more detailed plans. Because all of the other ones that we talk about show buffer setbacks, they've got other drawings, they've got some preliminary engineering things, because I have some concerns, and we've heard them from the residents as well, but from council is theoretically perfect. Not perfect, but it's there, but I just need some more. I know there's a lot of reports here, and I'm not asking for the environmental impact study right now. But there's a lot of things when I went through the reports they're asking for geotechnical. They're fairly expensive, as you're well aware, and probably the environmental impact is the biggest one. But even preliminary, more defined engineering plans with the topography is, the pond, if it's elevated, is a huge concern for me, and maybe for CN and everybody else. But I'm just saying personally, I think we need some of this stuff for, if we go to a first reading, I think we need it for a second reading before we get to a third. So, because the plan as itself, I get, but right now I don't see the setback, so I don't know. I can ask you, can you move the pond? Can you move the change a few things a bit different? And one thing I'll just ask, if you don't mind, through the Director of Engineering, I'd ask, or Planning, I'd ask at one point, can the road actually go out closer to the church? And there, I believe there's a reason for it because of the topography, but that was one of my questions at first, because going out Southwood, if you look up the hill, you're kind of a blind hill coming down. So I'm just making that comment. I need to see some more data before it gets to third, if it goes that far. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Deputy Mayor Schreier, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one more question on the buffer. Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Colburn, when we say buffer, We can put trees on a buffer, shrubs on a buffer, but can you explain to me the difference between a buffer and a berm? And if a berm does fall in the classification of a buffer, so that you could get some height between existing homes and compared to just a flat piece of ground with trees that are planted and expected to grow over the next few years.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Schreier. Mr. Colburn.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the buffer is an area that's designated to include elements that would mitigate impacts of the higher density or increased density against the lower density. So that basically is a designated strip of land at a given width that contain different elements. So it can contain a berm. Berm would be basically a mound, and you can plant on top of that mound. You can plant cedar edges, or you can plant trees. It could be existing natural trees that exist. So if you have a particular area where there's existing trees, you can retain those trees and you can't cut them. You can't do anything with inside of them. In some cases, you're permitted to put trails and those types of things. You can put a fence through there. It can be a combination of elements, providing that particular buffer zone to mitigate any impacts between the different zones. The elements that are used are usually reflective of the topography. So if you're on a slope, you build a berm, you have to be cognizant of the fact that is that berm going to wash away? So you have to basically work with the land to provide you with the best elements to provide that that mitigation factor.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Are there any other questions from council? Seeing that there are none, we have a proposed zoning bylaw number 038-38, R1 to R2. Deputy Mayor Schreier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would be ready to put a motion forward that council give first reading to the zoning bylaw 038 amendment for the mixed use development at 160 Pettingale Road, PID 251426, and second and third readings to be given at subsequent meetings of council, subject to the execution of a developer's agreement.
It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Schreier, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on that, just on the question, I think there's been a number of questions raised, as Councillor Schreier has mentioned, that the second and third reading, if it goes that way, would give the owner an opportunity to address the concerns and maybe check the topography of the land that would be more realistic in advising the neighbors of the actual berm or buffer that would be created, so that it would be easier to visualize. But the information has been well laid out, I think, this evening for the owner to digest, and also with our planner taking notes on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Your Worship. What was the motion? I'm a little confused.
I'll have the clerk read it back.
Through you. First reading, moved by Deputy Mayor Schreier, seconded by Councillor Olson. First reading be given to zoning bylaw amendment number 038-38, a bylaw that would rezone PID number 251462 from single and two-family residential to multiple residential, subject to the terms and conditions of a Section 59 Community Planning Act Development Agreement, and consideration be given to second and third reading pending receipt of more detailed plans as discussed this evening regarding the buffer, drainage pond, etc.
Thank you, Ms. Snow. On the question. Seeing there are none, please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. This ends the public hearing for this development. Thank you for being here, Mr. Dunn. Thank you to the presenters who brought their concerns forth. Item B, 6B, 258 Hampton Road, PID number 251959, Elm Tree Development, requested to amend Section 59 CPA Development Agreement. Proponent Al Kamkar, owner Landmark 258 Inc. To rotate the two buildings, each containing 50 units by 90 degrees. We have written submissions, PAC's written views, and 3 considerations of approval amending Agreement 258 Hampton Road. So I will ask for Mr. Kamkar to come forth. Would you please come to the podium and give your name for the clerk, please?
Good evening, Council and Worship. My name is Jonathan Rasenberg, and I'm one of the partners in the project.
Thank you. So you're doing a presentation?
I'll be making some comments and then ready for any questions.
You may make your comments now.
We put this design forward to change the design around after going through the engineering process, coming to the conclusion that it was somewhat cost prohibitive to put the buildings in the way we had because of the amount of elevation change over the length of the site. It would require a lot more retaining walls and a lot more complex water management as far as keeping the water storm drainage on site or from going off site. So after working through with Andrew Toole, the civil engineer, we came up with this design, and coming up with this design, we also really, we think it adds to the site. It pulls the buildings even farther away from the houses at the back of the property, which I think is a good thing for everybody. And it makes it quite easy for us to hide the storage or the storage spot there for our residents. It brings it down even lower on the grade, and so yeah, we're pretty excited about this, and also help with reducing construction time by not having so much site work to do.
Does that complete your presentation this evening?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I will now ask if there is anyone to speak for or against the project. If you are here to speak for or against this project, again, I will appeal to you to please come forward, because once I have read it the 3rd time according to procedural law, we are done with the public portion of for or against. So please give your names for the clerk.
We are Scott and Carolyn McCaver.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
And go ahead.
We did submit a letter to council, and I'm wondering if it's possible to call that up so we could see the drawings that are in it. Do the councilors see what is on the same screen? Okay. So we live in Balsam Court. We've lived in Balsam Court for about 27 years. So for the last 3 summers, certainly, and for years before that, we've known that something would change in the field behind us. So if you can zip to the attachments in our, so I trust you've gone through the letter already, but using the website suncalc.org, we've gone, so the center of that orange angle is our backyard, and that shows the position of the sun in February. If you scroll down, please. That shows the position of the sun, coincidentally, June 21st, summer solstice, where the sun is in its northernmost position. And again, I've transposed the position of the 3 buildings onto that lot with the position of the setting sun February and October and midsummer. So you can see from that, the sun will set behind these buildings for us from February to October of every year. So when you make a variance to the building height, that's a real cost to us. That's a real effect on our property. So given that, we prefer this orientation of the buildings compared to the others, but it is a real effect on myself, our house, and our two neighbors beside us. So our biggest concern is the buffer area between Building C, the storage garage, and the line backing onto the three properties on Balsam Court. So you can see on the right-hand side, the three properties that back onto 258 Hampton Road. So if you scroll down one more drawing, so this is the developer's drawing, and now it's been rotated 90 degrees, so that top line that you see, just up a little, so that top line that you see that's almost parallel to the top of the page, it shows a 9.14 meter buffer from the three houses backing on from Balsam Court. And it shows a 20 meter buffer on the left-hand, lower left-hand side, a 20 meter buffer backing onto the three properties adjoining to Pete Drive. So we don't see why the disparity, but if you scroll slightly up again to the ones on Balsam Court. So the buffer area behind our properties and between the parking garage at the back of 258 Hampton Road, that buffer area, it has a public walking trail going through it. And that public walking trail, if you scale the drawing, at one point it comes within 3 meters of the property line, and then on the second hump it comes within 1 meter of our back property line, which doesn't seem like much of a buffer to us. And especially the roadway, the secondary access into their parking garage, you can see comes less than 10 feet from our back property line. And there's already a very nice existing natural buffer. It's full of maple and birch, pine, fir, spruce.
And they're mature, right?
Yes.
They're mature trees that our house sits lower, so the ground where the proposed development is elevated from our backyard, and the trees have been maturing there for years. So right now it's a beautiful buffer, but in order to build those the storage units in the garages, sorry, I interrupted, but in order to build them exactly 9.14 meters from our property line, they're going to need to cut down so many trees because they won't be able to get their equipment in to access the land to be able to do the development, and then to put the trail in and the roadway. Really, there'll be very few trees left, and the trees are what are going to provide us with any kind of privacy from the buildings, which it's a large development, right? The buildings are almost the size of a football field, and the variance has been changed, so now they're not 3 stories, they're 4 stories, which really, yeah.
And you can see the disparity between the houses that back on from Pete Drive. The walkway that goes through their 20 meter buffer is actually about 14 meters from their backyard. So they get about 45 feet of buffer, and the Balsam Court residents get about 3 feet of buffer. So we would just like to see that something in the developer's agreement that the 8-9 meter buffer between the parking garage and the properties backing on from Balsam Court be left as is. And based on where we lose the sunset, we're losing the sunset that we have now from February to October of every year. We think it's a small concession to give us a buffer that's already there.
Yeah, and just really all the developer would have to do is take out a couple. Can I go this way? Yeah. So I think, I'm not exactly sure, but I think like on each side, these are the garages / storage units. And so on each side the developer has in the drawings about 20 per row. Really, if he just took away a couple on each one, I think that would solve the buffer issue. That he would, you know, all the trees could really be left intact, and we would see some of the development, but not all of the development, right? Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against the proposed changes? Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against the proposed changes? Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against the proposed changes? Seeing there are none, I will invite the Mr. Rothenberg back up to address the questions that were posed by Mr. and Mrs. McCaver.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. Part of our original, or part of our developer agreement would be a detailed vegetation management plan to maintain a visual buffer around the backside. That hasn't been, we submitted one originally with the plans, but it would have to be updated based on the change in design. I'm not, it's not my specialty, but we'd have to consult with them to see. There was a lot of discussion around, planting larger, more mature trees to fill any gaps in the tree buffer that's going to be staying there from the original trees that are there now. So I know that would be a consideration that we'd be happy to look at. And we probably could adjust that on for a couple of those storage spaces at the back there. I don't know about I think the road access, or the driveway access to it is probably the most important part of that. So I'm not sure. We'd have to take a look at with a civil engineer and see what options there were for that.
All right, thank you. I don't believe there were any other questions other than the buffer and the setbacks. And do we have PAC's written reviews on these? If somebody would like to read Councillor Thompson, PAC's written views. If you have those in front of you. Thank you, go ahead.
I was going to make a motion, but.
According to procedure, we should be reading the PAC's written views.
Take notice that the decision of the Quispamsis Planning Advisory Committee was rendered in the matter of your request pursuant to the provisions of the Community Planning Act of New Brunswick. Matter requested to request the Planning Advisory Committee recommendation to Council for an amendment of Section 59 Community Planning Act agreement that outlined the terms and conditions of the rezoning of 258 Hampton Road, PID number 0251959 from single or two-family residential R1 to multiple residential R2. Date and place of consideration of request, June 14th, 2022, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, Town Hall. Decision of committee that the Planning Advisory Committee support the council in the amendment of the development agreement for 258 Hampton Road, PID number 0251959 for Elm Tree, multiple residential, multiple residential apartment development and rezoning from single or two-family residential R1 to multiple R2 residential R2, subject to the following terms and conditions. 1, approval of the lot width variance of 76 meters from the town's zoning bylaw 038, section 9B1. Approval of a 2.0 meter height variance from the town zoning bylaw 038, section 9E1. Approval of a variance of 12 parking spaces from the town's zoning bylaw 038, section 911. 4, a traffic study is conducted to determine if there are conflicts or concerns with traffic patterns, the turn movements at Pinewood Drive and McCarran Drive at peak traffic volumes. 5, a comprehensive stormwater management report be prepared by a qualified engineer registered to the province of New Brunswick. Site plan must demonstrate and acknowledge that there will be a need for an on-site storage as indicated by the stormwater detention pond. 6, the development must connect to municipal water and sewer system. 7, a detailed landscape plan is prepared and demonstrating adequate buffering from adjacent residential properties. 8, street lighting installed at the entrance to the development is required, and all on-site lighting be directed downward. 10, all materials and equipment ordered on-site are the responsibility of the developer. 11, the developer is to enter into a developer's agreement with the town of Quispamsis. 12, the developer shall undertake to complete the work for each approved phase within a period of 2 years following the approval. The development must be completed as per all applicable town bylaws and policies thereto. 14, if the development does not substantially proceed within six months of the date of approval for each phase, the developer shall restore the lands to an attractive natural state, and such restoration be completed within 1 month. And 15, building permits are issued in accordance with the National Building Code of Canada, dated this 15th day of June, 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So we have consideration approval of amending agreement Hamel Drive developments. Councillor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if we could bring a particular attachment up onto the screen here from the council package. I'm looking at under 6B3, the consideration of approval of amending agreement. There's a collection of attachments there, and the second one in that collection of attachments is 258 Hampton Road, MEM Dev Agreement. Are we able to get, perfect. And just go to the second page if you would. And then however much you can zoom in on that guy, that large topographical image. Great, thank you. So I just want to make sure that I understand what the McCavers are pointing out here. Balsam would be sort of on the top and to the right slightly of kind of where that trapezoidal sort of angle exists, right? Where did the McCavers go? There you are over there. Okay, great. No, it's fine, thanks. And so I see the pink dotted line that runs diagonally down from left to right that touches the sort of the far corner of the storage unit that basically creates this 9.14, whatever it is, meter buffer. But I take the point that the darker green sort of roadway that bends around there is am I to understand that is an access point for residents to get into where the storage units are? Mr. Rasenberg, do you know what I'm getting at?
Please come forward, Mr. Rasenberg, so everyone can hear you.
Do you follow what I'm saying? Oh yeah, please, yeah. So the dark green line that runs, vertically on that image. It looks like it says emergency fire lane on it. But I'm just wondering about, I guess there's access from the bottom part of that image, which is a paved roadway that goes up into those storage units, correct?
Yeah, I think the plan was with that, and sorry, I'm not the designer that designed it, but it was supposed to be like a permeable. You maybe Dwight can speak to that. Or actually, I know you spoke with Andrew about a bunch.
Through you, Your Worship. So the dark green area is sort of to be a permeable driving surface, so water can actually percolate or get back into the ground. So a couple of things to point out. So the line that's offset and touches the storage, that is the minimum building setback from the property line, which is 6 meters, I believe. Within that area, the minimum buffer is 3 meters. So 3 meters is the minimum buffer area that would be retained. And within that buffer area, you can't build like driveways and those types of things. So given the concern that's been expressed, it would be something that planning would step back and look at in terms of what are the overall impacts. And again, as I've mentioned before, council has the authority to establish terms and conditions that they wish to see in these types of developments and development agreements. And if they feel that that buffer area should be increased, then obviously that's something that council could put forward as a term and condition. The other thing I'd just like to point out is that trail that's proposed, that is simply at this point proposed as a sketch on paper of where it would sit. Also, it is not a public trail. So that is a private trail for the residents of that particular property. So it's not something that would be maintained by the town where you would have just people walking up the Hampton Road going through that as a part of a trail. It's actually a private trail. So it's not a public trail. But again, those things are things that we will look at in terms of impacts of what would be proposed as a buffer.
Councillor Bigger, does that satisfy your question? Go ahead.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That is helpful to know that. I'm just, when I hear the McCavers mentioning about, a 1 meter kind of sort of buffer that's between kind of the edge of their property and how this lays out, and their suggestion about perhaps, shaving a storage unit or two away, that strikes me as a very reasonable accommodation. And I'm just trying, so I just wanted to understand, without passing judgment on whether that's the right move exactly or not, I just wanted to understand kind of the implications of that. So, because 1 meter is certainly not, in my opinion, it's not even, doesn't even match the 3 meter requirement. But anyway, thank you.
So it's still at the 6 meter between where the garage is. There's probably another drawing on here that would illustrate well if you look at it at 2D, yeah, maybe it would look more intrusive, but if you go to the 3D one, I think if you scroll down a bit farther, yeah, right there. So I'll go back. It's actually this storage unit sunk into the garage. Right around here, they really would just be looking over top of it. It's not up in front of their space. So, I mean, that is a consideration we did on purpose to help. Like I said, we wanted to use the buildings as like the retaining walls as the site goes down. It might be hard. It might be. I don't even know if they'll be able to see it. Honestly, it would be if there's any shrubbery at all in their backyard, you wouldn't even see that. I don't think. But
to be clear, probably we're concerned about people walking within 1 meter of the property. We're not concerned about looking at the back of the building.
we're pretty flexible around that trail where it goes between Dwight, the planning, and the landscape. If they want to wiggle that around to a different spot, I really don't see that being an issue. That was more of a conceptual. We just wanted a place for our residents to be able to walk their dog around the property. We want to be a pet-friendly building. We want people to be able to get out and get around. We have a vacancy rate of 1% in St. John right now. I think it's 0% in the valley. So we're really excited to get this thing going. There's some really new, CMHC's put out some really good packages for for building these products now, and we're ready to hit the ground.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation as well as concerns. And I guess one of them was brought up was, and a suggested proposal is either pull them just slightly, and it's not so much about seeing them, I believe it's also the trees that could be left. If you did pull it, I'm gonna say another meter towards, if it's possible, pull it a meter towards the new buildings, building B, or potentially the one that's on the garage that's on the closest to that property line could go either shift, if you don't take it away, but shift it over one. So if you go back to the next slide, please, whoever. Yeah, so even if you shifted it down so it's kind of at the, I'm gonna just point here, if you don't mind. If you don't remove it, but if you shifted it, so it went to here, that's just, that would save 3 meters of, I don't know if it's possible, that was just a suggestion.
I feel the need to argue over one.
No, I
space.
just asked.
No, but I think like, what do you want to do? It's not a make or break of the project. It's a relatively minor detail.
Yeah. And I think, Mr. Rothenberg, the people that are here would like to have answers to their questions just to make them feel more comfortable with the development. So it's not to ask you to do minimal things to appease them. It's to ask you to give a definitive answer, I guess, to their questions as much as you possibly
Sorry,
can.
repeat the question then again, Councillor Miller, please. Maybe I didn't quite catch it.
Close. I mean, I'll talk if you want me to.
I'll speak loud. So the question would be, was to slightly shift it either closer to the building by, I'm just gonna say a meter. I don't know the exact amount, but a little bit closer to building B. And the other option, they had made the comment about, because each one of these is about 4 meters wide, give or take, each one of the garages. If you could shift the back row over one, I'm not saying get rid of one, but you could shift it over one so that it would be just on the other side of where the main row goes up. There'd be a little bit of an overlag. And that was just the question, because that would take about another 4 meters of trees that would stay there, though. That was one of the questions. Like I said, it's not a big move. Either or, you could move it, I'm gonna say a meter closer to building B, so a meter towards the building, or shift that back row over one. That was just the question.
I'm not a civil engineer or an architect, so I don't sure if there was setbacks in there that were specifically set around to be like the fire access had to have so much curve. Like we've spent a lot of time on this, so I don't really feel qualified to say we could change it either way. But it would be up to whether this. I'm not opposed. I don't know if that drive around loop has to be just like that. You know, if we have to lose a garage or two, I don't think that's a big deal. That's what I was trying to say. That's not a big deal for us. Like if we lose a garage or two to give a little bit more setback to the residents there, like I know my partners won't be upset about. It doesn't change the feasibility of the project. That's what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just kind of wanted to reiterate my concern around the buffer. Just because when I'm looking at it, I guess the beauty of having a buffer is if there's mature trees there now, by the time you do a gravel emergency fire lane, it doesn't, I mean, again, there's going to be space, but it looks like a lot of trees. I'm in the building process now and wanted to save as many trees as I could. And I know that, you can have great intentions, but once you get bulldozers and everything else in there, trees a lot of times just don't survive because of all the other stuff going on. So anyway, I'm just kind of concurring with Councillor Miller and Councillor Bigger's comments. And I guess another suggestion might be to make the garages thinner and longer. So then that way, you make them shorter and they take a little bit more space. So they get fatter and shorter so you can stay away from that top buffer line. So, you can still have the drive around. Anyway, I will leave that to the engineers and the architects.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to see me draw it.
Yeah, but I do think, there has been some concerns around this, and I think it's going to be a wonderful development. But I think it would also be wonderful for the residents that are impacted to also have again, mature treed backyards, so they're not actually seeing in or hearing. It creates a true buffer if we can maintain as many trees as possible in that 9-meter buffer. And I guess I just have one other question more for clarity is, I thought in our last presentation, Councillor Miller had asked about the buffer, and I thought someone had said 30 meters. Maybe I misunderstood, so I'm just wondering if I could get some clarity if that's kind of the standard, and this is how now has been like pushed back to 9 meters. For some reason, I wrote down 30 meters as a normal buffer for R2. So if someone could clarify that for me.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Mr. Colburn?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship, the minimum buffer width between residential, multi-unit, and lower density is 3 meters.
Thank you,
And just
Mr.
one additional comment. So one of the things that will be required and was in the previous development agreement was a forest or vegetation management plan that will identify what that buffer is to look like. And there will also be a requirement with regards to how the clearing operates. So in terms of bringing a mechanical harvester in there and just clearing the whole area, there will be a requirement to actually take in consideration the impacts that would have on the buffer. So once you get closer to the buffer, then you can't use mechanical sort of clearing. You have to do it selectively so you can keep the trees.
I believe it all and pre-plan the trees that were going to stay, and then I know we went through with the landscape designer. There was a significant amount of like mature foliage that he wanted, like the largest you can get that is plantable, that would fill in any of the visual breaks in the existing trees that are staying there now.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to next in queue. That would be Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Rosenberg, I just wanted to, when you amended this project, you went from 3 buildings to 2, and that, if I remember correctly, generated an extra 20% for land usage for other things, because now instead of 3 buildings, we have 2. Mm-hmm. So I think the buffer, it would be my hope that something with the buffer could be managed when you've gained 20% more land usage or actual land. So I'm not going to continue on the buffer, but I think you've heard loud and clear that people are worried about the buffer. And to take down a natural buffer doesn't make sense to me. What I am concerned about is the timeline to build. We're in, crazy times. Productions and chain management is really difficult right now. And within it, do you think there's any way you could decrease your production time from 2 years, get it down to something more reasonable, like 16 months? I know I'm not asking you to read tea leaves, but I am asking you, that it becomes a priority, that the construction, because that too it affects the quality of life for the residents if there's continual construction going on behind their house. So if there's any leeway to move up the construction period.
Yeah, those are all very fair concerns. We're working through a package right now to be able to construct both buildings very, basically simultaneously, maybe a couple months buffer. But so that would significantly reduce the overall construction time, as opposed to being 2 years for each building. So we're working through that. I mean, as everyone knows, I just saw some stats the other day. We're up almost 40% in construction costs from where we were pre-COVID. It makes it difficult to make the projects feasible with such significant inflation in the construction industry. So we'll be doing everything we can to make it as economical as possible for the builder, to get the prices reasonable for the tenants. It's part of the reason why we went to the 2-building phase. It's just a bit more, bit better economies of scale. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are out of our control when it comes to building, especially these days with significant shortage of subtrades and capable subcontractors to be able to do the site. I mean, we're going to do it as quickly as we can. We'd like to do both buildings, pretty much effectively at the same time. I would hate to sit here and promise. I don't know. It's just it's a tricky one. it takes what it takes, and most of those elements that it'll affect that are pretty much out of our control. So, but we'll definitely do the best we can. It's most cost effective to do it as quick as you can, usually.
Thank you, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Schreier. Next, we have Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Worship. I would move that council would consider approval of the amending agreement subject to our staff proposing to include concerns on the buffer zone as discussed, and time frame for construction, and other points that were discussed this evening that require clarification through our planning department.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Thompson. On the question?
On the question, Your Worship.
Yes, Councillor Thompson?
I'm just noticing on the motion, it doesn't mention that we request the town solicitor to prepare the amendment to the Elm Tree Hill Development Agreement.
Should that be added?
Thank you, Councillor, for that clarification. This would all be subject to the information being brought back to council at a regular meeting.
So, do you want to revise it to read it this way?
I'll clarify it here so I get the proper terminology. The council requests the town solicitor prepare the amendment to the Elm Tree Hill Development Agreement in collaboration with the planning officer for renewal, for review and consideration of approval at a subsequent regular meeting of council.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson and seconded by Councillor Thompson. On the question? I do not see anything. Please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Thank you for being here this evening. This ends your public presentation this evening. Thank you. Item 6C, Hamel Drive Developments Limited, PID number 173732, previously Master Enterprise Limited, application to amend CPA Development Agreement adjacent to Route 119. We have the proponent Andrew Harrigan and Bradley Lockhart. Would you please come forward? And would you please each give your names for the clerk? Welcome, gentlemen.
Andrew Harrigan. Brad Lockhart.
You can go.
Okay, Your Worship, members of council, we appreciate the opportunity to come back and discuss our project. This is not a new project. It started quite some time ago under former ownership. Went through a rezoning process, I think around 2013 timeframe. So it's been through the public process back then. At that time, it was rezoned to a kind of mixed density, with the vision of the project being a combination of duplexes and 10 apartment buildings. About 4 years ago, we acquired the company and the land from the former developer. And we went through an amendment process then, and that as well was a public process. So you may wonder, why are we back again with a project that looks very similar to the last two times with a few minor changes? Really, the number one reason we're back is because it took us much longer than we expected to get a wetlands permit. So in 2019, there were regulation changes that occurred with the Department of Environment. And as a result, the wetland footprint of our land was much larger than what we thought. So we put in our application for a Wawa permit in March of 2020, right at the beginning of COVID, and we received notice just on Friday that the permit is going to be issued. So it's taken a little over 2 years to kind of go through that permitting process. So really that is the main reason that we're back. The dates had lapsed on our phasing and sequencing. It took 2 years longer than what we really anticipated. So we had to come back and do the process again, which is fine. And we're back requesting kind of a roll forward of the dates. And we also talked about adding 15 units to our high density apartment buildings. And you might say, well, why 15? And it came down to what do we think is reasonable, given some of the concerns about traffic and other. And it also, largely came down to cost of construction, which another developer just referred to. So the economies of doing these buildings in a larger footprint are better, and cost of construction have gone up at probably at least 40% in the 2 years that we've been waiting it going. So really, those were the driving forces behind the change. I guess the last point would be, we're also looking at trying to go simultaneously with the first apartment building and the duplex units, as opposed to the entire development in sequence. So that was outlined in the updated phasing and dates. And really that's a matter of, we're 2 years behind where we wanted to be already. So let's try to get them going at the same time. I think that covers, was there anything you wanted to add, Brad? Or? Yeah, I think that covers kind of why we're back and what the proposed changes are.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I will ask at this time if there's anyone here to speak for or against the project. Welcome. Please give your name for the clerk.
R. Scott, I really don't have no objections to the subdivision. I just wanted to make sure that I have a little bit of input when they're doing their master plan for the water diversion, because there's a ditch on my property that goes onto this property, and I just want to make sure that, we get it all straightened up, what kind of waterway we're going to have. Half of my ditch is covered, half of it isn't, and I kind of like to know, are they going to put a covered ditch in? So it's just something I like to have some input in, make sure, there is a lot of water that goes through this in the springtime and heavy rains. And for the last 40 years, I've been looking after this ditch, and I gladly give it away. But that's all. I just, if I can have some input when they're doing their water management.
Not to put words in your mouth, Mr. Scott, but my understanding is that you were in favor of the development, but you would like to know what the water channel is going to be so that it doesn't come back on your property.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I have no problem with the development.
Okay.
Okay.
So you are in favor. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against the development? Good evening. Please give your name to the clerk.
Yeah, my name is Calvin Malanga.
Calvin.
I will be next door to their phase 1A. I think that will be the first one that they will be doing. Mine are just questions, no objections really. I wanted to know roughly what how many floors this phase 1A apartment is going to be, and roughly how long is it going to take for them to build it up and finish it up. Those are my two questions.
How many floors the apartments would be, and how long will the development take? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
4 years. Okay. Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Again, is there anyone who is for or against the development? Welcome.
I'm Jennifer Shannon. I live on Milliken Drive. I'm not against the development either. I think it's
an addition to the neighborhood. But just worried about traffic, I guess, on Milliken. It's probably come up already in previous meetings, but with the additional 15 units, it's a lot of traffic up and down our street if the entry to this new development is at the bottom of our street. So just wondering if there's an option to have a different entrance into this new development from either Swanton or a different street, or what traffic calming procedures will be done to help alleviate the traffic. I think as it stands right now, I think Milliken's probably one of the busiest dead-end streets in Quispamsis. We have a lot of traffic from the high school and all that, which we've come accustomed to, but this will be a lot more traffic on a daily basis up and down our road. And we have young kids. I have young kids that like to bike and walk the dog and all of that. So just to try to keep the street a little calmer, and what will be done to either slow down the traffic or if it can be rerouted by a different entrance, I guess.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Does anyone else have anything for or against this project? Second time. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against this project? And final third time. Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against this project? At this time, I'll ask the developers to come back and address the questions that were just presented.
Thank you. I think the first question related to stormwater management, and this is, a concern that was raised through the last amendment process. And so with each phase of the project, we do go through that same detailed stormwater management planning that was referred to earlier this evening. And that process does identify, any stormwater that's coming through adjoining properties onto ours. And that plan does need to come up with a way to deal with that, be it piping or ditching or some other way to manage stormwater that's coming through. So we have, we've done detailed stormwater planning on phase 1A. We've done detailed stormwater planning on a retention berm, a pond that's going to go in the lower wetlands area. We've done some early stage stormwater planning on the rest of the development, and we have identified, I think, 3 places that there's stormwater coming from adjoining properties. And, the same as the last time we went through this process, we have absolutely no problem kind of working with neighboring property owners during that planning process as we work out the details with engineers to make sure that they understand what's proposed and whether that's going to work for them or not. The second concern, or I guess the question, was around the first apartment number of floors and how large they are. Maybe Brad, you can take that one.
Yeah, so the building's gonna be 3 stories from Hamill Drive, and 4 stories on the back, which is the arterial. So from the front, it's only a 3-story building with a flat roof. So 3 stories. 3 stories. With a flat roof. And 4 stories on the walkout, on the back, face of the arterial.
If you're going to speak, we need you at the microphone. These gentlemen are completing their...
I think I could maybe ask the question on their
Okay, if you could
behalf.
just direct your answers into the microphone, otherwise we don't hear it up here, and you are addressing council. Thank you.
I think the question was how large the second building is going to be.
Right, so the second building will be 4 stories on Hamill Drive and probably 2 to 3 stories on the back facing Milliken. Because it's a big bank there. So we're probably 4 stories behind their backyards. The street. And it also has a flat roof.
And I think the other question was traffic mitigation.
Correct. And so traffic goes back to even the original rezoning process. And so at that time, and I think it was included in the package, there was a comprehensive traffic study done. The conclusions of that study were documented that the development at that time was going to be well within what residential norms would be. And so the question becomes, well, has there been enough of a change since then that would cause the conclusion to be different? One of the things we did do, and it was not a requirement, but we went back to the engineering firm to ask that question without doing an entire study. If we go to 124 units, will that change the conclusion? And so we do have that available to provide to the town if that helps.
Thank you. And I guess a question for myself, I'll just leave the chair for a moment, Deputy Mayor. Has there been, what was the date of the last traffic study, just so that the public know? And
The original traffic study was July 2012.
And will
then
there be an updated one on that?
So we did not ask for a full study to be updated. What we did as developers, we went back to the engineering firm and we asked them to go back and provide us an opinion, basically a 2-page letter to review the original study, rerun the calculations, assuming we're at 124 units instead of 92 at the original study, and provide us with their conclusions about whether this still fits within residential norms or not. And so that would be dated just last week, that we have not had an opportunity to send into the town, but we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. I will return to the chair, Deputy Mayor. I believe you've answered the questions that were posed. The length of time, I believe, was...
Length of the phasing and construction. So I believe our current phasing is about a 4-year time frame, starting this summer, going up to 2026. But again, that it will be subject to market demands, but the current plan in terms of phasing goes up to, I think, December 2026. Let's see. Not sure if you might have that in the... yes, December 2026.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? There's a consideration in your docket. Councillor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask the developers if you could maybe speak a bit more to the concerns raised about the idea of maybe shifting the entrance to the development to Swanton from Milliken. I wonder just what your thoughts are on that, if that's been considered. There was also a written submission from someone about possibly the use of speed bumps as a way to mitigate speed coming down Milliken. So there's, a variety of concerns expressed about that. And it's not uncommon, as we're seeing even tonight with many of these kinds of projects, And so I just wondered if we could get a little, I just don't, maybe you already mentioned something about that and I just missed it, but I wondered if you could just sort of give a little bit of reaction to that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's clear that, and it was identified in some of the correspondence that came into the town from the notice. It sounded like there even existed today, before we do the development, some concern around speed on Milliken in particular. So I can tell you from our point of view, so in terms of what was proposed, and I thought there were some very good suggestions around, I think the term is traffic calming measures, speed bumps, digital radar, those sorts of things to slow down traffic that already exists on Milliken. I thought those sounded like good ideas that would typically fall under the normal course of the way the town would look at traffic calming. In terms of the entrances to our subdivision, since we're now starting at both ends, we're expecting to be able to access through both Susan and Milliken. And I do know, in terms of the traffic study, if you were to funnel all of the traffic at one of those streets instead of having it divided between the two, it does change some of the outlook in terms of the traffic. So it would be much more heavily weighted to Susan. So I think our intent was to try to distribute it across the two and give people easiest access out from each end of the subdivision.
Thank you. I will go to Deputy Mayor Schreier.
Thank you, Your Worship. And my question is regarding traffic flow and the entrance. So just the first question is, have you had any discussions with the Department of Transportation on the arterial? And if so, where are those discussions gone to? And just as an alternative, or should there be future conversations about this whole development and where we may not do it right away, but down the road, what would be the availability to do something like that? And my apologies.
Okay, no, appreciate the question. We have on 2 occasions, had discussions with the Department of Transportation. And that was about understanding what the opportunity or potential was to have an access directly out onto the Gondola Point Arterial. And so really we narrowed down those discussions to 3, I'll say 4 potential locations. 2 of them were on the land that we own, and the other 2 would have been opening back up the entrances to Milliken or Swanton. And so a couple of years ago, we actually had some discussions with a property owner about potentially acquiring a house to enable the potential for an access at that point. And we, ruled that out purely due to feasibility. We looked at one location on the property we own, close to the first apartment building, Phase 1A. And the ideal spot for that ended up becoming part of our stormwater plan. So we have pretty significant stormwater ditching that comes down along the property line there, which would have made it more of a challenge to consider an entrance. And then the second location on our land that we considered was closer to where Milliken used to connect to Monarch. And with our expanded wetlands area and stormwater berm that's going in that space, it would push the potential access point pretty close to where Milliken and Monarch would connect. So we had some safety concerns with that. And so really by process of elimination, we said, if there were, the most logical place now would be to reconnect Monarch and Milliken, but that would be a town-led initiative, not a developer-led initiative. And we said, okay, well, let's proceed with our plan with something we know is still within residential norms for traffic and not, count on another access.
Next, I will go to Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think my question would be directed perhaps to the Director of Engineering and Works. One of the things that, reading the submissions from residents that live in the area, one of the themes is speed and traffic. And it sounds like there is some issues now, and it seems like it's all over our town, but this particular road on Milliken sounds like, again, there's, issues around speed. So again, adding a number of additional cars and drivers is going to make that situation even worse. So I guess I'm just wondering, is the onus completely on us? Is there an opportunity for a partnership to kind of nip it in the bud and address it beforehand, knowing that we are going to be adding a significant number of additional cars on that street? Because that's, again, one of the things that seems to have come up quite a bit with residents that have written in and shared their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Director of Engineering.
Through your worship, what we would be doing is looking at the baseline traffic volumes and speeds that are now. Look at the report that's being revised that once it's submitted to us to see what they propose as they see as the new counts will be. Generally speaking, when it comes to traffic calming measures, depending on the nature of the traffic calming, if it's required, the type selected, normally that's an operational cost that the town would undertake, particularly if it just involves signage or some type of passive traffic control. If there's an extensive construction of bumps or road diversions or something of that nature, that would be something that, if it's warranted, we would look back to the developer to see if there's a cost sharing opportunity there. But we have to be respectful of the fact that the town does have some responsibility to say, okay, what is there now? If there's a speeding problem from a complaint from the residents, we have to go back and investigate that with the police and say, is that actually the case? If it's a low volume street and there's less than 100 vehicles in a day or less than 50 vehicles in a day, it's local traffic, is that truly a speeding problem compared to a street that has 500 vehicles a day and visitors from other areas? This is a confined subdivision, basically one or two ways in or out. When you look at from Milliken to Sunrise to Phillips to Swanton Drive, and so there's not a big range of through traffic. So what we would be doing is establishing our base counts seeing what's there to address the concerns of the residents, then compare it to the incremental changes that are being identified by the consultants. And then likely we would do is after the fact, do those measurements and then at that time decide if it's warranted for some type of upgrades or not.
Thank you, Mr. Logier. And Councillor Bigger, please.
Yes, Your Worship, I am prepared to read the Planning Advisory Committee findings if you'd like. I would just like to quickly point out that I think it bears mentioning that if you were to reconnect Milliken and Monarch across the arterial, sometimes, that could create a problem with traffic in the other direction where people might dart down the arterial thinking they can quickly shoot up through Milliken up onto Hampton Road. And so a traffic problem could be created or a speeding problem or what have you coming from the opposite direction. So I think it just bears mentioning. But anyway, I digress. Shall I read the findings? Okay. Take notice that a decision of the Quispamsis Planning Advisory Committee was rendered in the matter of your request pursuant to the provisions of the Community Planning Act of New Brunswick. The matter requested to request the Planning Advisory Committee recommendations to Council for an amendment of the Section 59 Community Planning Act agreement for the Hamel Drive Developments Limited, formerly Master Enterprises Limited, for an integrated mixed residential development on the property next to Route 119, having access from Milliken and Swanton Drives, PID 173732. The date and place of consideration of request was June 14th, 2022, the Planning Advisory Committee meeting at the Town Hall of Quispamsis. The decision of the committee is that the Planning Advisory Committee support the Council with the approval of the Developers Agreement Amendment for the development of Hamel Drive Developments Limited for integrated mixed residential development on PID 173732, subject to the following terms and conditions. 1, any variances such as building location setbacks to be considered under a separate application as the final designs are yet to be submitted to the town. 2, the developer shall pay the town the sum of 78,000 Canadian dollars, representing an outstanding levy for municipal sanitary sewerage installation to the lands. As part of this amendment, the repayment schedule of the levy must be adjusted, with the caveat there shall be no further adjustments to the repayment schedule regardless of the state of the development given the period of this outstanding levy. 3, an engineered design stormwater management plan and drainage system stamped by a registered professional engineer licensed to practice in the province of New Brunswick is to be completed and submitted for each phase of the development. 4, a site design showing the creation of the buffering zone as it relates to the neighboring residential R1 zones must be approved by the town prior to construction. 5, street lighting installation at the entrance to the development shall be installed. 6, all building lights to be downward directed. 7, all materials and equipment ordered on site are the responsibility of the developer. 8, the developer is to enter into a developer's agreement with the town of Quispamsis. 9, the developer shall undertake to complete the work for each approved phase within a period of 2 years following approval. 10, the lands shall be developed in accordance with the most recently dated building and development plans filed with and approved by the town for each phase. And number 11, if the development does not substantially proceed within 6 months of the date of approval for each phase, the developer shall restore the lands to an attractive natural state, and such restoration is to be completed within 1 month dated 15th June 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Read by Councillor Bigger. Deputy Mayor Schreier, please.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm prepared to put a motion forward. The council requests the town solicitor prepare the amendment to the Hamel Drive Development, Inc. development agreement in collaboration with the planning officer for review and consideration of approval at a subsequent regular meeting of council.
It's been moved by by Deputy Mayor Schreier, and seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, seeing there are none, please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. You're finished here this evening. Have a good rest of your evening. Item number 7 Minutes of the previous meeting, actually the two previous meetings, May 3rd, 2022 first. Councillor Bigger,
Yes, Your Worship, I would move that the May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting minutes be approved as prepared.
it's been moved by Councillor Bigger, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer. On the question, Councillor Luck? Oh, sorry. No? Please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Item 7B, May 7th, 17th, 2022, regular meeting. Councillor Bigger, moved by Councillor Bigger.
Thank you. Yes, so moved that the May 17th meeting minutes be approved as prepared.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Luck. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Item 8, unfinished business. Minister Elaine's response to Quispamsis letter re local governance reform, Regional Service Commission's proposed new mandate. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, Your Worship, I move, there we go. As the town's concerns were communicated to the province in Mayor O'Hara's letter of May 19th, 2022 concerning the proposed new mandates for the Regional Service Commissions, Minister Elaine's letter of response be received and filed.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question? Yes. Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did notice that also as part of the attachment, UMNB also wrote a letter to the Honourable Daniel Alain, and I'm just wondering, I'm assuming that we haven't heard any correspondence yet from them, and I guess I'm wondering if there has been, and if not, I guess if that can be sent to us once it's received, hopefully we'll hear from him.
So there wasn't anything that I've received. Ms. Snow, have you received anything?
Sorry, was your question, the minister's response is in the package?
Yeah, the response from the UMNB.
The minister's response is included in the...
So the question was, Ms. Snow, we've received a response to my letter. Councillor Luck was wondering if we had received anything from UMNB stating that they too had heard from Minister Elaine, or no? I haven't received anything.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll communicate with the ED and find out if they did. Councillor Olson on the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to repeat that I think that we are going to be having a lot of additional work added to our council work, and especially to you as a member of the RSC. There's going to be a lot of downloading, in my opinion, and that hasn't been clarified as to my concerns. And it's going to be some major work expanded on the Quispamsis Council and other municipalities around the province. So I think we should watch that very, very closely. I don't think they're going to change anything, but I just want to raise that point again.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. I will certainly keep council updated and staff updated on anything that comes through the RSCs, through the Regional Services Commission. And you're absolutely correct. There is a huge download of provincial responsibilities that are now being downloaded to municipalities throughout New Brunswick. Councillor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I just also wanted to say that I appreciated the context that the Honorable Daniel Allen's letter, strives to give, but I think it's what's not said that's concerning, and I also agree that I think we are going to have to continue to be sort of vigilant in this process, to retain sort of maximum autonomy as a community and to avoid having a number of responsibilities and maybe associated costs downloaded to us as a result of this process. So I don't think it's yet been revealed. I think there's another shoe to drop almost about it. But in any case, I just wanted to voice that concern. Thank you.
Thank you. I can say that the question was asked that if there is a download of more work and files to be placed upon municipalities, where will the extra funding come from to both put human resources in and other services that this is going to require? So thank you for that. So it has been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, seeing there are none, please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Item 8B, Scholarship Committee's recommendation for award of town scholarships, ratification of email poll. And Councillor Donovan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have any questions as I'm on the Scholarship Committee, but I do have a few comments before I make the motion, if that's okay with you.
Just make the motion and we'll get
Okay.
a seconder and then you can make your statements on the question.
Okay, I would move I would move that council ratify the email poll conducted June 15th, 2022 to award the town's 2 scholarships to the recipients as recommended by the Scholarship Committee and outlined in the Community Services Director's staff report dated on June 14th, 2020.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. While I'm not allowed to name the individuals yet, I will say that some of the common themes amongst this year's recipients and applicants were honesty, resilience, and determination. I know I speak for all council when I say that we are beyond proud of the hard work that each and every student has put in over the past 4 years. While this committee has come to a decision on the 2 students that will receive a scholarship, there were many incredibly deserving individuals who did not receive one. While this can be a little upsetting to some people, this is a reminder to the students who are not recipients to not panic. You are all very smart, caring, and impressive in your own ways, and you just have to believe in yourself and not doubt your abilities, and you will all go very far. So on behalf of myself and the Scholarship Committee, congratulations to those 2 individuals and to everybody graduating this year. Thanks.
Indeed, thank you. And yes, congratulations to our 2 KVHS recipients. On the question, please vote now. Motion carries. It's not coming up on my. Motion carried 7-0. Thank you. Item number 9A, correspondence. Oops. Oh. Item 8B1, Scholarship Committee's recommendations for additional scholarship in 2023. Sorry, I went over that.
Thank you. I'll read the motion. I do have another quick comment afterwards, but I would move that council approve the Scholarship Committee's recommendation of adding an additional $750 to the 2023 operating budget for a 3rd scholarship.
It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question. On the question, Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. And as most people probably remember from my previous comments like 2 minutes ago, I will say that the scholarship committee was so inspired by the level of young people excelling in our community. And because of that, we've decided to recommend to council the addition of a third scholarship that will come into effect for the 2023 graduation season. You know, as a council, we often discuss, you know, returns on investment, and that's certainly for a good reason. I can say wholeheartedly that I believe the youth in our community are worth every dollar of this investment. They are our leaders of today, our leaders of tomorrow, and they will ensure the future is bright for our town. So I fully support the addition of $750 to our operating budget, and I certainly, you know, I can't speak for everybody else, but I really hope others would be in favor of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
And thank you, Your Worship. I just want a clarification on the motion. Are we approving the 750, or are we recommending the 750 to go to the Budget Committee?
I believe the motion is to create a third $750 bursary. Correct, Ms. Snow? That's correct, Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Just one second.
Would the normal process be to recommend it to the budget process before approving it? Or does council wish to just go ahead and approve it? Doesn't.
I will ask Ms. Brandon to respond to that.
Based on this recommendation, Your Worship, we will add this line item into the budget for council deliberation at budget time.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon, our treasurer. So this item will be included in the 2023 budget requests. On the question, we have a motion by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Miller. Seeing there are none, please, oh, sorry, Councillor Olsen.
Yes, the motion would be amended, wouldn't it, to have it referred to the Finance Committee for the budget process in 2023?
I believe that it should be a motion to have it presented to the budget. No, we're okay?
Through you,
I'm going to defer to Ms. Brandon.
Through Your Worship, I believe it's fine how it is. We will add it into the line item where that budget resides, and then at council deliberation, it will be up to council to decide at that point in time. But based on this recommendation, we will add it to the budget.
Okay, thank you. It will be added to the budget. So the motion is good. Okay, so please vote now. Thank you. Motion carried 7-0. Now on to item 9A. Madison Wright, rezoning application, 318 Hampton Road, PID number 451815, single and two-family residential, R1, to neighborhood commercial, NC, for 8 3-chair hair salon. In attendance, Madison Wright, Matthew Robichaud, and Sarah Mallory Wright. If you are here, could you please present yourself to the podium? And you are requesting for a rezoning application, correct?
Yes.
And that's at 318 Hampton Road, PID
Yes, that's
451815. And
Yes, I'm Madison Wright.
so was there any presentation you'd like to make on this? Anything further?
No, yes, it was brought to my attention this week, or this past week, was speaking with Jennifer Jarvis, that there was a recommendation from the PAC to have a entrance on the Hampton Road. I have provided it's very similar to the initial parking lot that I had proposed. It is slightly larger to allow further parking, so there's no need for the Hampton Road access, as I am concerned about losing 2 parking spaces if the parking lot was accessed by Hampton Road versus the current access on Autumn Avenue.
Would you like to respond to that, Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Jarvis. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. In response to that, we would really like to see, and it, just for clarification, it is an 8-chair hairdressing salon that's being proposed, with also an esthetician, 1 chair for an esthetician. So, and 7 of the chairs, the rental chairs are 7 of the chairs are rentals. The proponent will be assuming 1 of the chairs for herself. Anyway, further on to the Hampton Road, it is a collector road, and as part of the rezoning, we look at, you know, the impacts of traffic and whatnot to the community at large. Hampton Road is a collector road, as I said, so it is designed to handle larger volumes of traffic, with a business suggesting to have 8 hair salon chairs and 1 nail esthetician. I expect there would be a bit of more traffic to Autumn Avenue if it was to go into, you know, the access was to be off Autumn Avenue. So staff really think that the proper access would be off Hampton Road, because it is a large enough road to accommodate the additional traffic.
And is that in contrast to what we just heard?
I believe that she is asking that we allow them to come off of Autumn, where staff would really like to see that entrance for the business come off of Hampton.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Snow, your light is flashing. You didn't have anything? Okay. Deputy Mayor Squire.
Thank you, Your Worship. It seems to me, if my memory serves me right, there's a business right across the street that is a hair salon, and maybe it's not open anymore, I'm not quite sure, but they access by Autumn, and they have a beautiful shrub out front on the Hampton Road. And so I don't see, unless the number of chairs are different, like why would we not allow it to still go off of Autumn, which makes sense, because when you go down there, there is a large parcel of land off their driveway, which you can see there's ample room for parking versus cutting into the Hampton Road. So I guess I'm just asking, if a precedent's already been set, then would we be able to follow that, or is there different rules? And
It was in discussion amongst the planning department when we looked at the proposed plan, that it was identified that it was probably best to come off of the Hampton Road, and simply because of the higher volumes of traffic. I know that there was a rezoning application in place for 2 Autumn. I don't believe that that ever was approved by council. So I believe it's a home-based business. I'm not familiar with the number of chairs that are there. But I do know that in our planning meeting that we did discuss the Autumn Road as opposed to the Hampton Road access. And we felt very strongly that the Hampton Road was probably the best access for the proposed business.
Is there a follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
I guess my follow-up would be to, if we also have an apartment up above, is that taken in, those numbers taken in as well to the spacing, parking, how many parking spots you need?
The parking for the apartment, are you speaking for the apartment in
The
the upper
business
portion
and
of
the total
yes,
number
yes.
of parking
So
spaces, because it
that-
seemed it's 16, isn't it? 16 parking?
16 parking
It seemed like a
spaces.
lot to me, 16 parking spots, so.
Well, we had to look at the number of chairs and the number of persons that could possibly be at the site at any one time. I did speak with the applicant and was informed that the ideal dream is, of course, to have all of the chairs full and busy. So in knowing that, I have to look at, there's going to be 7 people renting a chair and then 7 people sitting in the chair. So we're at 14. And then we have the proponent who would have parking for herself in the apartment above, would be off of Autumn Road, sort of separated and different, totally different spot than what's being proposed for the business.
Thank you. I'm going to Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I have 2 comments. One is, I guess the intent is for us to schedule a public presentation where most of this will be hashed out. So I will make that motion. But before I do, I guess when I think of Hampton Road, there's a number of small businesses now. There's a dental office, there's another hairdresser across the street, and they're all accessed on the secondary roads running perpendicular to Hampton Road. So again, I guess that's something that we can hash out at the public presentation and perhaps go to PAC with, if that makes more sense for, again, it's on the corner, so it's not like they're driving all the way up Autumn Avenue. But anyway, I will make the motion that council schedule a public presentation date for July 19th, 2022 at 6 p.m. and advise pursuant to Section 25 of the CPA.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Luck, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, please vote now. Thank you very much, Ms. Jarvis. Didn't come up? In favor? Motion carried 7-0. Thank you. Barbara Hickey, concern of one access in and out of the mobile home parks, Parkside Road. Ms. Hickey, if you are here. Is Ms. Hickey here? No? Okay. There is a recommendation. Deputy Mayor Scryer?
I'll put the motion forward and then I'll just speak to it. That Ms. Hickey's correspondence, which raises the point of only one access in and out of the 3 mobile parks, be referred to discussion items under the town's transportation master plan.
Thank you. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Luck. On the question, Councillor Olson? No?
No.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Scryer?
Thank you. I encourage Barb Hickey to write her concerns to Mayor and Council because of the access to the trailer park in and out. And I have had discussions with Director of Engineering, Mr. Loge, and his views will be sent to Barb Hickey. But it is a concern. I mean, it is a large neighborhood. Anywhere that we only have access one way when you're talking about emergency vehicles, and if there should happen to be something that the road is closed off and they're isolated. So by it going to the town's transportation plan, it'll give an opportunity to be in top of mind when we're looking at developments with other entrepreneurs. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, Your Worship, that I totally agree with Deputy Mayor Schreier that it is an issue at the park because I've having worked in there and gotten caught in there, simply because someone's bringing a mini home in and it's crossways the road and that's it. Nobody can get in or out. An accident one on Parkside Drive closed up everything for 3 or 4 hours. Nobody could get in or out. So it is an issue. I don't know how it can be alleviated, but it is a huge issue. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and it has been referred to the discussion items under the town's transportation master plan. On the question, motion's been moved by Deputy Mayor Squires, seconded by Councillor Luck. Seeing that there are none, please vote now.
I don't know why it's not coming up. I'm good.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 9C, Councillor Noah Donovan, request for street name Equality Lane off Landing Court. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sure most of council has already seen it, but not all members of public have been able to, read or hear my letter, so I'll just read it really quickly. I am respectfully asking that this council consider the creation of a new lane called Equality Lane beside Quispamsis Town Hall off of Landing Court in recognition of the many diversities that help make up our town. This lane will symbolize the work that has been done around the world to promote equality and combat hate, specifically towards LGBTQ+ people and Black Indigenous people of color, as well as a reminder of the work that still lies ahead of us. Inclusivity, acceptance, and love all come from the heart, so it only makes sense that this lane be located in the heart of our town, a place where all of us gather as neighbors and friends regardless of our differences. Equality Lane, which points directly to Town Hall, will demonstrate our council's commitment to promoting and celebrating diversity and equality, while also serving as a visible reminder of our intent to make good decisions without prejudice or bias and always in the best interests of our community. I am a believer of the phrase, if it's meant to be, it will be. In researching this proposal, there were many aspects that couldn't have fallen into place any better. After a discussion with the Director of Engineering and Works, it was clear that there was a few factors at play when considering the creation or renaming of a street, the most important of which are whether the street is currently occupied, 1, and if the proposed name fits New Brunswick 911 naming standards, 2. 1. The side street off of Landing Court leading to the skate park, where this lane is being proposed, has no current occupants except for the skate park, so there would be no risk, inconvenience, or confusion of residents having to switch over their addresses on subscriptions, banking, postal, etc. 2. There does not appear to be another equality lane in New Brunswick, let alone the Greater St. John region. As Mr. Lozier explained to me, if there was another roadway bearing the same in Rothesay or St. John, New Brunswick 911 would prohibit its use to avoid confusion in the event of any emergencies. Quispamsis is a vibrant, forward-thinking, progressive community. We are trailblazers in all the right ways. I believe this is just another step we can take to show that we truly care about all our residents and are actively working to maintain a town where everyone feels like they belong. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. There is a recommendation on the table. Deputy Mayor Squire.
Yeah, there's a motion on the table?
No, there's a recommendation to be read.
Oh, I was going to second the motion.
Go ahead. Deputy Mayor Squire, are you reading the?
Oh, no, I was going to let Deputy Donovan.
Okay, Councillor Donovan.
I would move that the proposal for the street name Equality Lane be referred to the Planning Department staff and the Planning Advisory Committee for review as per subdivision bylaw 035 in the Community Planning Act and with respect to the approval of street names.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Thompson. On the question. Seeing there are none, please vote now. You're good? Deputy Mayor Squires. Okay. Motion carried 7-0. Item number 10, bylaws. 10A, Property Star Inc., rezoning application, residential R1 to highway commercial HC, PID number 250217 and PID number 173765. Total of 17.2 hectares. Proposed municipal plan bylaw amendment number 05403, consideration of second reading, and proposed zoning bylaw amendment of 038-34, consideration of first and second reading. And this evening we have with us Mr. Hatfield. Welcome, Mr. Hatfield.
So good evening, council and staff, and thank you for the second opportunity to be up here tonight. I'm going to start off a little different tonight, and we talked earlier about the Regional Service Commission and what's going to be downloaded to council and to the town of Quispamsis. And if we look at our strategic plan that was just adopted of May 2022, and we go through that and you go through the executive summary, we look at the infrastructure, and we look at all the different things of community commitment, economic development, and community or capacity building. One of the opportunities we have in front of us is to increase the amount of commercial space in the town of Quispamsis, which would increase the tax base, which would also increase the funds available to pay for the downloading of information that's going to be coming and services that are going to be coming in the future. I look at this summary and I've read through it several times, and I'm sure everybody here on council has as well. And if we look at some of the guiding principles that are in this, we come to, I guess, an understanding of infrastructure management and taking the infrastructure within the town and making sure we're maximizing the use of it, whether it's the sewer, whether it is the water, and putting those things to use. Currently, the water and sewer has lots of capacity to do so, which taxpayers have paid to build the service, to build these water towers, but we're not fully executing the use of them and the development of them. This proposal that we have on the arterial would use those facilities to what they were designed for. We looked at commitment to the community and building upon natural strengths of the area. Well, we have an area here, one of the last large pieces of land that meet the criteria that has been set aside by the bylaws of Quispamsis. So working with that, we feel that this is a strength for it. Economic development, a place to invest, positive business environment. This is also check marks, I feel, in our favor of our proposal in front of you tonight to make sure that we look at those. Capacity building, the town of Quispamsis ensures it is ready for growth through improved communications, enhanced interdependent cooperation, efficiencies, and improvement to its capacity. This area right now, as we've seen in your documentation tonight provided by staff, we have approximately 11 hectares of highway commercial space left in the greater Quispam area. Of that, a lot of that is small 1-acre parcels that don't allow large developments, whether it's a new pharmacy or a new grocery store. This proposal in front of you tonight of the arterial project would allow something like that to happen for future expansion. So I'll move on from our infrastructure and our strategic plan and talk about what we had last March on the 16th meeting and the concerns from the residents, from council yourself. And I want to talk about the first one being the increasing of a buffer, privacy setbacks, and noise. Currently, with the commercial development, it's a very minimal setback. We've increased that setback to 25 meters. And in looking at that, 8.5 meters will still be natural habitat, which is approximately 25 to 35 foot trees. We've also taken that 25 meters and incorporated a new embankment. We've looked and we were able to take the elevation down 6 meters, approximately 18 feet. So we're not just gonna have the natural trees, we're also gonna have an 18-foot berm of natural products that is there now to basically shield noise, shield the businesses, and nobody from the Monarch will see anything in this development. So that addressed many of the concerns. The lights itself, they're gonna be downward facing. We looked into digital clocks at nighttime. They will dim down, lower the power restraints, so there's not as much brightness at nighttime. We also looked at Colton Brook. Colton Brook is a main throughway for the water source, for cooling water source for the Hammond River. It keeps the Hammond River cold. We did a water delineation study, identified some wetlands throughout the property, and we have worked with the engineers to look at these, to delineate these and address them. One of the ways we are addressing these are through a bioswale. And a bioswale, if they read the notes, is a natural habitat where we're going to build, use existing materials, small shrubbery, that's going to help cool the water as it comes off the hot surfaces. So when it enters into Colton Brook, it's cold again. And that's one of the big things we want to continue to do there. One of the other major concerns that I wanted to address was increased traffic. And I am totally opposed to the increased traffic because currently there is one entrance into Monarch Drive, the Monarch subdivision. By adding in our new entrance off the arterial, I don't understand how we can have increased traffic. We're going to have a connection onto Finney Lane. People are not going to be entering Monarch to go to this commercial development. They're going to be entering it through the arterial. What I do see happening are people from the Monarch Drive area going down Colton Brook onto Finney and coming up into the new commercial area to access the arterial in a safe manner, a controlled access, whether it is lights or whether it is a rotary circle. I think if anything, Monarch Drive will slow down on traffic because the amount of people won't be there. It'll be the local organic traffic throughout the neighborhood and the neighborhood only.
How much time does he have? Sorry. Well, I thought you had 5 minutes.
5 minutes is for the people who are asking questions or for against.
I apologize.
For the persons doing presentation or people who are an amendment, they have longer. Sorry for the interruption.
Problem, Your Worship. So looking at the traffic, I feel it's going to be slowed down. We had the public hearing. We had mixed reviews of people on the street saying that their kids are out there playing all the time. We had another resident saying that there's too much traffic now. So it was kind of mixed both ways. In my opinion, looking at this, people aren't going to be accessing Monarch to access a commercial development. They're going to be going through the controlled access to get there. And if anything, this will help out. And as Deputy Mayor Schreier spoke earlier, this neighborhood only has one entrance as well. So in the long run, we're trying to help out and work with the community to do and have a second entrance. If we can look at, I think it's probably slide 10, and it is the one that has the scale on it. I'd like just to point that out. Has a horizontal scale, I think. As we scroll down here, I'll approach the screen. As we look at down one more just a little bit, right here. So if we look at this would be Monarch Drive. These are the natural trees here. We have an 25 meter buffer. You know, we're talking 75 plus feet. A natural 8.5 of existing trees, and then we have a slope down. And at that slope, this would be the proposed ground level of our buildings. This is an example building. So if your house is here, you're not going to see this building. You have trees, a natural buffer. This natural buffer of the berm will help sound and contribute sound. So as a proponent to this, I wanted to take of the community and look at that. And that was one of the biggest challenges we thought we had. We found a great solution. Yes, there's going to be a lot of earth to move, but it solves all the concerns of what we heard from the residents. As we look through this as council members, we take those major 4 points of consideration. That this site has adequate access to the arterial and connector road, yes we do. That the site can be equitable, serviced by water and sewer services in accordance with the applicable regulations, yes we do. that the site is a significant size to meet all parking, loading setbacks, and lot coverage, landscaping, other requirements. The zoning bylaws, yes, we do, and that the consideration is given to protect the adjacent residential development by requiring an acceptable vegetation buffer strip, specifically the size, type, the location, signing, and lighting to be used. Criteria demand for appropriate by council. So these are our basically our set in stone agenda that you as council members need to work with. And I look at these and I say we've addressed all these and we've really knocked them out of the park, in my opinion. As we continue this process, I look at this as an opportunity for you as council members to really make a change for the community, for future growth, for future consideration, to increase the tax base and make this town of Quispamsis a continued recognized name. I'll conclude my presentation with that.
Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. I will go to council now for questions. Councillor Donovan, your question, please.
Thank you. My question is fairly straightforward. At any point, whether it be the first, second, third, fourth, fifth phase, however many phases there are to this, is there any plan to move any part of the Homestar operation down to the Monarch area, whether it be, because I live in French Village and I live down, by the Elliott Road, and it is fairly industrial. You've got shipping containers there, and you've got trucks all over the place, and I expect that because it is, it's Homestar, but I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want that in that area. So I'm just wondering if you could provide a little bit more clarity for me for that, if you don't mind.
Straightforward answer. Mr. Donovan or Councillor Donovan, Homestar will not be on this property.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions. I noticed, Mr. Hatfield, that you referred to a controlled access onto the arterial. How is that controlled?
How is that controlled? That will be developed between us and the Minister of Finance, whether they deemed it to be a set of lights or a rotary circle. They've been granted us access to have an entrance. The actual layout of that will be determined with the traffic engineers. I do believe town will have some say in it, and then again with the transportation minister.
So I guess my question is, at this point in time, it's not controlled. You have
For phase one, it states that it'll be just an access, and it's not has to be controlled until phase two, which is the larger development.
Okay. Now, my other question is, I think on the previous presentation when you were here, I think I asked the question about Finney Lane, and I think the answer was that you weren't going through Finney Lane, but you just said that a few minutes ago that you were going through Finney Lane.
So again, on phase one, we do not connect through. On phase two, Finney Lane is connected through.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions for Mr. Hatfield? Seeing there are none, we have before us a proposed municipal plan bylaw amendment, number 054-03, consideration of second reading. Councillor Luck, please.
Your Worship, I'm not ready to make a motion. Can I ask another question? I guess this would be directed to either Mr. Colburn or Mr. Logier. That, again, I'm just wondering, is a buffer of 8.5 meters of trees, again, is that enough, in terms of, I guess I keep thinking back to, it's wonderful that Mr. Hatfield brought up, our mission and our vision, but I also think part of our mission is being community focused. And I know that there's a lot of concern around one of the biggest investments that people make in their lives, which is their homes. So again, I don't think any of us take this lightly because we don't want it to affect the residents in that area already. So again, I guess I'm just wondering in terms of this new change around having the 8.5 meters of trees with the 25 meter of buffer, knowing what's there now, because I know there's power lines. So again, are there already mature trees that, like, how will this work? And would it be that if someone is living on the other side of it, would they even know that anything is going on the other side versus it being just kind of bare land that they're still going to hear everything and they're going to know what's happening? I'm just wondering, based on the current topography, what that actually in reality looks like.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Mr. Logier or Mr. Colburn, would one of you like to respond to the question? Thank you, Mr. Colburn.
Thank you, Your Worship, through Your Worship. So in terms of the buffer and the width of the buffer, the current zoning bylaw, when it comes to highway commercial zones abutting residential developments, the way the current zoning bylaw is established is it looks at two elements. One is the distance of the actual building away from the property line. That zoning bylaw requirement is the distance that the building is set back from the common property line is twice the height of the building. So in this particular case, it would, based on the information that we have in the drawings, it appears that the development and the location of those buildings would meet that 2 times the height of the building away from the property line. In terms of the actual buffer, the highway commercial zone does not particularly establish a buffer width. It comes down to what is determined as being a reasonable or acceptable or adequate buffer in the opinion of the Planning Advisory Committee. And in this case, because it's a rezoning, council has the authority to consider the buffer that's been proposed. If we use as a guide some of the other zones that have established buffer widths and we review it through that lens, the business park commercial zone, which is located along Millennium Drive, the buffer width has been established, and that's 15 meters of width. In this particular case, we have 8.5 meters of being proposed of retaining the actual existing trees or ground, if you will, and then a change in elevation for a total sort of buffer of about 25 meters. Light industrial zones, okay, so that's down in the Palmer Brook area. It again states specifically that there's a 15-meter buffer required. So 15 meters seems to be that magic number that's been used to establish where buffer widths have been considered and established through zoning bylaws, and the development scheme bylaw is what we would be looking at. So again, to go back, highway commercial zoning, the actual buffer width has not been sort of set forth. It's based on the review of the Planning Advisory Committee. And again, in this particular case, the council would have an opportunity to consider the buffer that's being proposed and considering if it would be adequate. Recognizing there is an existing power line through there, and there may be openings, again, part of this process through a development agreement and in terms of terms and conditions, it could be that those areas would be looked at in terms of mitigating any openings. So whether that's berms or trees or those types of things, that's something that would be considered through this process and something that council could consider as they consider the adequacy of the buffer that's being proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Councillor Luck, that answered your question. Thank you. Certainly.
Thank you. Just on that too, Councillor Luck, if we look on to drawing PL1, with the 6-meter embankment cut, basically we are lower than the transmission lines are by 6 meters, is about 18 feet. We've applied to the MB Power to have access to their right-of-way to place berms. We've had discussions. There's been nothing decided on that. That is a transmission line that's not actually in use anymore. So they said chances are this should be fine. And I was looking at doing that for the first 2 residents in their backyard. So by us cutting down, we've basically created a natural berm of 18 feet because now we are lower inside the area. So just wanted to add that to that.
Thank you. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Hatfield, maybe this is a very obvious question, but how did you arrive at 25 meters for a buffer?
We looked at the, I guess, what PAC recommended, wanted to go a little bit more than what everybody actually wanted. And by doing that, it allowed us to cut down the existing property where we're going to be establishing highway commercial. What that did is created that natural buffer, which is going to be a big sound retention to anything that's going on. It's basically like it's a probably anywhere between 15 to 20 meter wall that is 6 meters high. So sound's not going to go through it. So from the residents on Monarch, they don't see anything. They don't hear anything because everything's down the ground, lower. And that's why we looked at it.
Thank you, sorry. And can you describe, generally speaking, the use of that, let's say, rear, portion of the property? I mean, I've heard a lot of concerns about endless beepers of reversing trucks and, large machinery being moved and stored and so on and so forth. And I'm wondering if you can characterize generally what is going to be going on back there.
Yeah, I think that would go back to Councillor Thompson's question that if Homestar was going to be there. And we don't plan on putting Homestar there. As I said, it won't be there. We have other places that we're looking at right now, negotiating on. What goes on in a retail warehouse space? Yes, there's definitely probably trucks that have beepers, whether it's a transport truck or a forklift. Definitely, they do your normal hours of operation. But again, with the 6 meter embankment, I don't think you're going to hear that. It'd be no different than what you hear around the neighborhood now.
Why not put Homestead there?
It's not the place for Homestar. I need some more space.
Has that been your conviction from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to
Thank you,
not
Councillor
speaking.
Bigger. Councillor Donovan, have you already spoken? Do you have another question? Okay.
Thank you. This has been sort of a painful process for me, only because, I can see both sides of the story. I understand that I understand that you're in business and this is a good thing. And, again, I'm not against development and I'm not against, moving Quispamsis forward. And, I respect that you're, trying to, build something or bring something bigger and better to Quispamsis. And I hope you would respect that, I have to sit here and try to make decisions that I think are best for everybody. And I'm just not sure if this is it at the time being. I would personally, I would like to see, this remain some form of residential, whatever that may be, because residential can entail anything from, houses to apartment buildings. And I do personally think that would fit that area better.
Councillor Donovan, do you have a question?
I'm making a comment. I'm not giving a question, I'm making a comment. I'm not allowed to make a comment?
Ms. Snow, is he allowed to comment on the issues at hand? He should be asking a question, is that correct?
But council members can express their views at this time. And perhaps if a motion was put on the floor, then council speaks to it as well.
So if we can put the motion on the floor, then you can speak to the motion. Councillor Miller.
If there's no other questions, I'm going to make a motion. Second reading be given to municipal plan bylaw amendment number 054-03.
It's been moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question now, Councillor Donovan, if you wish. Seeing that there are none, please vote. Oh, Councillor Luck.
Again, this is a very challenging decision because again, I think in terms of looking at economic growth for our town, it's important, but keeping in mind that it is having a big effect on the residents in that area. Have you ever considered, like, I know with phase one, I guess that's where I'm really stuck, to be honest. In phase two, you're far enough away, you're out in kind of the boonies, no, you're not around anybody. It's phase one where I feel like you're right in the backyard of a number of residents on Monarch. Is there any consideration of changing the design so, again, you're even further away from that residential area? So I guess I'm just really worried that the 25-meter buffer, because we're talking about, well, it should. I guess I really feel like I wanted some type of assurance that, if we say, yes, let's move ahead with this, that we're not backtracking, after it's built and people are saying, we're hearing beeping all night and it's ruined our quality of life. And now, we want to sell our house because, we're up all night hearing the noise that we are hoping that we're mitigating. And really it is the phase one part where, and I just don't know if there's, if you've looked at other possibilities to develop that phase one further away so you're not affecting, the back end of such a large part of the residential area on Monarch.
Well, we've looked at it from a feasibility standpoint of where you have to have its own access to obviously develop the land that's first in front of you. The more road you put in, the greater the cost. To go to the back of the property and work out, you're then putting in, for rough sake numbers, probably 3/4 of a kilometer of road, which you're developing something that nobody can see. You'd have to take down all the trees to get to the back. So we're starting from the front and working our way back. As we stated with highway commercial, there is no designated buffer. PAC recommended, I do believe 15. We've gone to 25. We've lowered the building. We've set it further away from the property. When you put all those things in consideration, the first 4 houses are, even by the 4th house, we're more than 25 meters because there are some wetlands in there that are going to come into play that are already buffered from us. And that is on slide, actually might have been the one right there right now. So if we look at this one here, we can enlarge this one. If we look here now, this is the bioswale, it's going to be here, and this is wetland. So the residents on Monarch, the first 9 to 10 people, we're talking somewhere in the vicinity of probably, if that's 25, that's 125 meters away. So we're quite a substantial buffer. This is all area right here that is not going to be developed. And it can't be developed. It's considered to be in the wetland conservation and part of our bioswale.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table, moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, please vote now. No, she's gone.
Worship, tie vote. 3-3.
3-3.
To cast the final vote.
In favor of second reading?
Pardon me?
In favor of second reading, first reading. This is first reading, yes.
Motion carried, Your Worship, 4-3, with nay votes Councillor Donovan, Councillor Luck, and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. The next is first reading given to zoning bylaw number, 03834. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move first reading be given to zoning bylaw amendment number 038-34.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, please vote now. Three. In favor of second reading. First reading given to the zoning bylaw.
4-3, Your Worship.
Motion carried 4-3. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Pardon me? Mr. Hatfield? Oh, second reading. Okay. I can't hear what they're...
There's second reading to the zoning bylaw amendment.
The public hearing was held back on March 15th. It's procedural bylaw. It's not made by us. We follow the provincial governance.
We voted this council in.
That's correct. You did, sir.
Yeah.
You don't get to speak.
Mr. Donovan never had a chance to finish.
Mr. Donovan was speaking.
And you cut him right off.
Yes, I did, because we had to wait for the motion to be made, and then he could speak. He chose not to speak because I asked him if he was going to say a question. Good night, sir. Please leave the chamber.
Yes, I will. No problem.
Councillor Miller.
I'll move second reading be given to zoning bylaw number 038-34.
It's been moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question. Seeing there are none, please vote now. Three. In favor. Motion carried 4-3. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Item number 11, new business. MPSF Developers Agreement, Alpenglow Phase 2 amended. Councillor Miller.
I would move council grant assent to the MPSF Developments Inc. Oh, sorry, we're presenting for this? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll stop. I apologize. I didn't know you were here.
Go ahead.
I apologize.
Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and council, staff.
Did you want to present?
I'm here on behalf of MPSF Developments to seek assent from council for the Alpenglow 7-lot subdivision off of Model Farm Road.
And does council have any questions for Mr. Forgeon? Now, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the council grant assent to the MPSF Developments Inc. Subdivision Phase 2 plan, subject to the execution of the standard development agreement so that the plan can be stamped and signed by the town clerk and development officer for registration in the provincial land registration system.
It's been moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Thompson. On the question. Seeing there are none, please vote now. She's saying yes. Motion carried 7-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Ferjean. Queensberry Heights Phase 14B, Council Assent. Staff report from Municipal Planning Officer. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Your Worship, I move that the council grant assent to the Queensberry Heights Subdivision Phase 14B final plan, subject to execution of a standard subdivision development agreement with the town. So the plan can be stamped and signed by the town clerk and development officer for registration in the provincial land registration system.
It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Luck. On the question, Councillor Olson on the question?
No,
No?
no, sorry.
There are no questions. Please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Bryden Subdivision 165 Vincent Road, PID 248518, land for public purposes. Council assent. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Yes, Your Worship, move that council grant assent to the Bryden subdivision plan so the plan can be stamped and signed by the town clerk and development officer for registration in the provincial land registration system.
It's been moved by Councillor Scryer, or Deputy Mayor Scryer, I'm sorry, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question. No question. Please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Item D, 2023 General Capital Fund Interim Budget Approval. Staff report from Town Treasurer. Did you want to speak to that, Ms. Brandon?
Through your worship. So as we've been going through and doing our planning and tendering and dealing with the current supply chain issues and cost increases that are happening globally, in order for us to get some very important pieces of capital equipment that we need to do, we are recommending a change to kind of our budget process. This would be an interim measure. And what we are looking for is interim approval for a few capital items that are included in the report. One of them being a Zamboni, which has greater than a year lead time, as well as 2 plow trucks, which I believe the lead time is even longer than that, more almost 16 months on some of them. So in order for us to get our procurement, get ready, get in the queue, get in line to be able to receive this equipment, to be able to actually utilize it within our 2023 budget season, that's why this measure is before you currently, so that we can start the procurement, get things going, and then as we bring forward our 2023 budget, we will also be bringing forward our 2024 capital budget and asking for initial approval at that point in time so that we may get ourselves in line, in queue, to get these very important assets that, you know, in the most part are beyond some of their useful life that we're using, and our repair and maintenance costs are even, they're through the roof right now. The financial statements will be coming forward in our reports, but again, we're just trying to look at different ways to do things, different ways to mitigate things, and different ways to just look at how we're doing our business in a more efficient and proactive way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Luck was next, but I went to the treasurer. So Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is just unfortunately a new reality of the times where if we don't plan ahead, we're not going to get what we need. So I'll move that resolve that that the council of the town of Quispamsis accept the interim 2023 general capital fund budget as presented with a total of $940,000 in capital expenditures.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Luck, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question? On the question, Councillor Olson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank the treasurer for bringing this information to council's attention this evening. It is extraordinary times, as Councillor Luck has suggested, and I would say that we're probably one of the forward-thinking communities to look at this advanced financing because things are changing out there. So thank you for looking at that and bringing that to our attention. Thank you.
Councillor Donovan, please.
Thank you. I'm not against it. I just have a quick question. So in the capital expenses form here, it says equipment, and there's 2 plow trucks. There must be a difference between 2 of them, is there? Because they're 2 different prices, but it just looks like the same. So I don't know if there's a big difference, or maybe if the director of engineering can explain to me.
Yes, Your Worship, through you. The plow truck's being identified as a tandem unit and a single axle unit. So the one is slightly larger than the other. The single axle units are used in the tight subdivisions like Cedar Ridge and in the smaller areas. The tandem units are more suited for the major collector roads. So we've identified those 2 units as being critical to ensure that we can actually plow streets in the winter of 2023.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess through to the treasurer and all the other directors. Are these the only capital items that we're looking at? I mean, are there any other vehicles, or are these just the larger ones that we know are delayed? Because I'm just speaking, even getting a truck now, you're taking 16 months. So it was kind of a question. Is this it for 2023? And thank you.
I'll start.
Ms. Brandon.
Through Your Worship. So we did strategically kind of go through and look at these things. These are not going to be the only items being proposed on our 2023 capital budget, but these are the items that have the longest lead time that we need to get started quicker. So what you will see in the 2023 budget process is you're still going to see a full 5-year plan. At that time, you'll see the full 2023 proposed capital budget. And I'll also be asking for you to approve the 2024 at that point in time as we roll forward through this.
Thank you. There is a motion, I believe. What's that? It's already been moved and seconded on the question. Please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Item E, proposed 2022 budget schedule. Staff report from Town Treasurer. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that's a typo, actually, in the outline on the left there. Wouldn't it be the proposed 2023 budgeting schedule? Is that not correct? But under the actual details of the motion, it's correct. But I'm just saying that in point E, 11E, you've got 2022 there. But anyway, I was going to make a motion that the proposed 2023 budget schedule be approved as prepared, but perhaps the treasurer wants to speak to her report.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy, no, okay, we're good. I lost my control board here. Ms. Brandon.
Through Your Worship, yes, I can kind of just go through the summary. Not a lot has changed. Again, as we're going through and trying to be as efficient and cognizant of time as possible, now, since the province moved our budget deadlines from November to December, we used to have a finance committee meeting in August to discuss the schedule and all of those things, but since the dates have changed and we try to get our budget process started earlier in the year so that, you know, we're not all in a rush in September trying to give staff and everyone more time to prepare the budget that will come before you. I just felt that the finance committee meeting in August wouldn't be necessary. And then the other change that I've proposed is to change the special open session that typically was on a Saturday to a Wednesday. And this would be in October. Just again, some of the reasons the UMNB conference also takes place on a weekend in October. This would then at least free up another weekend for council. And again, just there's also better media availability when we have it during the day. And again, all of our meetings, all of our budget process, all of our council sessions are all streamed. It's all available online. So that is why I made the recommendations and the schedule as prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I'm actually okay with this as long as it works for everybody else. I'm fortunate I've been working long enough that I've got a fair amount of leeway as time off and I can book it. And ask maybe instead of a Wednesday, a Thursday or Friday. Wednesday's kind of dead in the middle of the week. It's harder if I'm planning different things. So a Thursday would even be better than a Wednesday, and I don't know. I guess I'll look at Councillor Luck, Councillor Donovan, or like. Right now, I know I've got the flexibility, so I can plan this in advance. I'm not traveling like I used to, but a Thursday or Friday works better for me, and I'm okay. Obviously, if we have people that are working, like, you know, years past, some people couldn't take that time off, so we always had to have Saturday. But right now, it works for me as long as if it works for everybody, I'm perfect with it. Just maybe a Thursday or Friday. Wednesday's just bad because if I do have to go to Toronto, it's. If I'm lucky, I get home at 2:30 in the morning if you've flown Air Canada lately, so. Just to ask.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, I'm sure people will know what my thoughts are, but, you know, again, when I ran for council, I knew there'd be evenings and weekends, so that was something that I went in with my eyes wide open, so I'm not worried about spending a Saturday, because I know that's part of the job. You know, I worry about the precedent that this sets, and I think that, you know, again, if it's an exception for this year, let's talk about this year. I really don't want it to be just moving forward. We're not going to be meeting on the weekends, because I worry about long-term, the message that this sends to potential future councillors. We're telling people that basically we want people that are retired or are unemployed, because typically, you know, people work Monday to Friday. So if we continue to have council meetings that are critical, I don't want to miss this meeting. It means I have to take a vacation day to actually attend this meeting. So I think we just have to be cognizant of the implications of what that says to people long-term in terms of, you know, running for council. And then just to build on Council Miller's comments is, you know, again, you know, working, you know, typical business hours, a Wednesday is definitely a lot more challenging and actually throws my week off and makes my work-life balance harder than perhaps a Friday. And I would ask that if we are going to do it during a traditional work day, that we make sure that that date works for everybody versus telling us the date, kind of either doing a doodle poll or something to make sure that that date can be set soon, and that it works for everybody. Just because, again, when people are on council that have other previous job commitments, it does make it a little bit more challenging. So again, the Wednesday's not ideal for me, because if anything, it makes it more challenging than the end of the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Councillor Thompson.
I guess I was just curious. We haven't determined when in October this meeting is to take place, whether it's on a Thursday or Friday. And I know we have the UMNB AGM in October, and I'm not sure on the dates. I think it's a Thanksgiving weekend. So whether it's a Saturday or whether it's a Friday, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, but it is important to ensure that everybody.
Thank you. UMNB is over the Thanksgiving weekend. Ms. Brandon? UMNB is 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Through your worship, again, this was the proposed schedule. It is up to council to determine that. So also that's why the motion was written as presented or as amended. So if council wishes to make a motion to amend the date, they may do so.
Thank you. Councillor Donovan?
Thank you. And I would agree with Councillor Luck. And I think, you know, having it closer to the end of the week is probably best. So, you know, if Friday is what would work best for her, then that would more than likely work best for me as well. So I don't know how we would amend that, but if we want to amend it, that would be perfectly fine with me. Friday.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Councillor Olson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. With all due respect, being a member of council for 31 years now, and when I was mayor for 12 years, I took a lot of personal time because of vacation, and I was led by the demands of the position that I worked with, and I had as much flexibility as I could make of it. But there is responsibilities when you're elected to a position like this, and it's getting more and more demanding every year. But I understand Councillor Luck's concerns, and I support her, but you don't have to be retired to be on council.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, based on the discussion, I'm not sure. Right now, the proposed date is Wednesday, October 26th from 9 to 4. I'm wondering if people would be in agreement to amend it to Friday, October 28th from 9 to 4, if that would work in other people's schedules. So at least if people are traveling for work or what have you, it's at the end of the week versus the middle of the week.
So you wanted it changed, Councillor Luck, from the 26th to when?
To the 28th.
To the
So
28th,
Friday
which is
instead of-
Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's heard that. Yes, we have changed the work week also to a 4-day week, so we'd have to see what executive people were available on that day as well. Councillor Bigger.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to offer to either withdraw this motion or, I can't see by it, sorry, to withdraw this motion or you know, amend it accordingly and let it stand, whatever you'd prefer for me to do.
I'm going to go first to Mr. Kennedy, and then we'll discuss that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if there are practical issues if we move to the Friday, the 28th. Tuesday is an actual council meeting, which is included in the schedule as well. So in terms of if we were here, it's not? It is what? Right, so we would want. Sorry. Sorry, if we're talking about meeting on October 28th, which is a Friday, we would have a regular council meeting on November 1st, which is 4 days later, correct? That's a Tuesday night. So I'm not sure whether just in terms of turning those documents over to get the council kit back out on the Friday afternoon, have it published for the public on Monday, is feasible if we meet on the Friday in advance of the Tuesday council meeting. I don't think that's gonna work.
Ms. Brandon?
Through your worship, yes, because the original date was Saturday, October 22nd. So I moved it to the Wednesday, allowing enough time to get everything completed for the council agenda. So if we are talking about a Friday now, then it should be the 21st in order to have enough time to meet the November 1st deadline. Every date in here is dependent on another date. So that would be my recommendation, would be to move it to the 21st rather than the 26th.
It doesn't work for you, 21st? Oh, Kirk is away? No, Mike is away.
I'm on tour for 2 weeks and from the, well, not 2 weeks, but from the 13th to the 24th. And then Ontario. I'll be arriving home on the 22nd.
Can we just do it as like an email poll or something?
You're all welcome.
Counselor Donovan is asking if we can do an email poll. The only thing is, you're away from the 13th to the 24th? And that's a tight timeline for having it prepared and having it discussed through council and having it ready for November 1st. We're guided by the provincial government restrictions, so we do have to have it done by November 1st, I believe, by that meeting in November, so that we have it ready to pass by mid-November, by our next meeting, which would be the 15th of November.
So what about the 27th? Back here,
I can Zoom. I'm not entirely unavailable, depending on when. I mean, I can do the 27th.
Yeah, I mean, we could do the 27th.
Is that too tight for you?
That's too
One extra day.
That's daytime.
Too tight.
Not four. Yeah. So I'll be on stage that night. Depends on Ontario.
The 27th?
But through the day, I'm available.
Your worship, come on, let's go.
Your worship,
Yep.
if I may.
Go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
Just a point of order. Point of order. Point of order. Could we not discuss this via an email poll? We are in open session.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So, Councillor Miller, Bigger, you were going to make a motion to table this.
Yeah, so, thank you, Your Worship. So perhaps what I'll do is I'll make a motion that, given schedule constraints that are being raised in the discussion around the proposed 2023 budget schedule as presented, that a subsequent email poll be conducted to allow us to zero in on the optimal date that will work best for everyone.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Bigger. Seconded by Councillor Luck. On the question, please vote now. Deputy Mayor Squire is good. She's in favor. Motion carried 7-0. Item number 11F, proposed increase to kilometrage rate, staff report from town treasurer. Councillor Olson.
I'd move that the mileage reimbursement rate be increased to 0.55 effective July 1st, 2022, and that this item be included in the annual budgeting process with the other fees and charges.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Squire. On the question, Counselor Miller.
Just a question on, and maybe I missed it here, just the effective date, just next week? Is that, did I miss it when I read that, or?
On the question, please vote now. Oh, on the question? Oh, okay, you're voting, okay.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on. I tried to fix it when I was out there. Were you in favor?
Yes. Motion carried 7-0. Item 12, reports. Counselor Olson.
Move we receive and file reports, Your Worship.
It's been moved by Counselor Olson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer. On the question, please vote now. Yep, good. Did that come up? Motion carried 7-0. I've lost my business arising from Committee of the Whole. We have one item on that. Counselor Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move council ratify its decision from Committee of the Whole to renew its contract for legal services with Richard McPhee for another one-year term, effective August 1st, 2022 to July 31st, 2023, under the same terms and conditions for the day-to-day legal services of the town.
It's been moved by Counselor Olson, seconded by Counselor Thompson. On the question, Counselor Luck? No? Seeing there are no questions, please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Hoping that everybody finds some joy in the coming weeks and that everyone gets out for Canada Day. I'm looking for an adjournment. It's been moved by Counselor Olson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scryer. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 7-0. Have a good night, everyone. Safe travels home. Thanks for being here.